Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Sham Kagod here. Now, before I start the discussion, if there is no issue with the sound, can you please give me a thumbs up? Give me a thumbs up. Yes, alphabet yes, Y, anything is okay. Done. Thanks a lot. Let's start then. Let's start. So, what we have done yesterday? Yesterday, we started with the concept of industries, right? In the idea of industries, the chapter was started last week itself, that is Sunday last week. We continued with the remaining part of the discussion in the industries. In the industries, what we have covered yesterday, right? We discussed the concept of LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, and globalization reforms. Liberalization, just in a nutshell, deregulation. Liberalization means deregulation. Privatization means government, the ownership of industries in the government will automatically come down. The industries, or let's say the companies of the government, will be sold to private sector. And in privatization, we have discussed the policy of disinvestment. And within the disinvestment, I've discussed how the disinvestment is conducted by the government, right? The model of minority disinvestment, right? Or the other majority disinvestment, complete privatization. And whenever the disinvestment is conducted, how does government utilize the funds? I hope remember National Investment Fund, etc., etc. And within the National Investment Fund, how the funds are utilized or for what purposes the funds are utilized. My recommendation is please by heart the list. Simply by heart the list, right? Every now and then I keep on telling you, this is what you're supposed to by heart. This is not required for UPSC, don't by heart, etc. So in the list of do's, one recommendation that I will definitely give you is please by heart, right? Please by heart the list of the users, right? For what purposes the funds which are there in the National Investment Fund can be utilized for. Okay. Now, for example, the funds within the National Investment Fund, NIF, can be utilized for railway capital expenditure, can be used to conduct rights issue shares or purchase the shares under the rights issue of central public sector enterprises, invest in the metro projects, invest in nuclear energy projects, etc. And so these are purposes for which you are supposed to utilize the funds from NIF. After that, what is the new disinvestment policy? The latest disinvestment policy. That is, Government of India has divided the sectors into two parts. That is a strategic sector, non-strategic sector. In strategic, I've given the list of industries which are covered under that. And in non-strategic, anything that is outside this. For example, I was checking the comments later. Some of you had asked a question, sir, examples of non-strategic. You can write many examples. For example, if you look at the strategic sector, in any one of them is agriculture mentioned. Just have a glance of it later, right? And I've told you, please by heart that list of strategic sectors as well, right? So agriculture not mentioned, textile sector not mentioned, right? So you can see in the day-to-day right market itself or in the day-to-day activities itself, there are so many sectors which are there but which are not covered in the strategic sector, which means these are part of non-strategic sectors, right? So that is one concept. After that, we have discussed national monetization pipeline, NMP, national monetization pipeline, which will be implemented till 25. The whole idea for monetization pipeline is there are certain assets with the government which are underutilized or unutilized. Is it okay? Which are underutilized as well as unutilized. Right now, Government of India wants to monetize. That is simply create a value for these assets by leasing out these assets in the market for, let's say, a duration of 30 years. And one term that you need to remember is monetization includes brownfield assets or brownfield projects, not greenfield projects. Okay, that is one more very important point. After national monetization pipeline, we have also discussed what are the advantages as well as the concerns or issues related to NMP. After that, we have discussed NIP, National Infrastructure Pipeline. Under the National Infrastructure Pipeline, NIP, Basically, after national monetization pipeline, we have discussed national infrastructure pipeline. Under national infrastructure pipeline, more than 111 lakh crore worth of the investments in infrastructure. For example, do you need to remember the whole list? No. This is the trick. You talk about railways, roads and power sector. Railways, roads and power sector. These will come under the national monetization pipeline as well as national infrastructure pipeline as well. It will come under both of it. Okay. After that, we have discussed the concept of MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises. Okay. The micro, small and medium enterprises basically consist of the various types of units wherein we are going to classify this according to MSME Act, right? According to MSME Act of Government of India, based on two parameters, that is investment as well as turnover. I hope you remember that number, investment and turnover, right? 1 crore, 5 crore, 10 crore, 50 crore, 50 crore, 250 crore, right? So the investment and the turnover limits are there. Based on that, we have divided the industries or units into micro, small, medium enterprises. Now, why the MSMEs are required? Why the MSMEs are needed? Simple. MSMEs are required because they employ lot of number of people, more than 11 crore people. Number of MSMEs are lot, that is more than 6 crore MSMEs are there. But in fact, under that also I've told you, please focus on that fact also. Most of the MSMEs are micro enterprises in India. Most of the MSMEs is a micro enterprises in India. Okay, so understand the logic here. MSME is more than 6 crore number and more than 11 crore employments. After that, it contributes to production, both services as well as manufacturing. It contributes to the GDP. It contributes to exports. Right? So these are some of the reasons why MSMEs are very much relevant, are important for Indian economy. Then we have discussed what are the concerns, what are the problems that are plaguing the MSME sector. What are the issues that are plaguing MSME sector? The issues are, one, credit related issues. They are not able to get access to institutional credit. Second one is the disruptions in the economy, not only in the domestic market, but also in the international market are a problem for MSMEs. Third one is NPAs in the MSMEs are increasing. They are actually rising. And fourth one, delayed payments to the MSME sector. That is also a problem for the MSME sector. Then what are the reforms? What kind of measures have been undertaken by the government? If you remember, I've listed around 8 reforms and I've told you clearly, this is not an exhaustive list. As you keep on reading the newspaper, you'll come across multiple types of reforms that the government is taking to protect and promote MSME sector in India. For example, there is a Mudra Yojana where refinancing agency has been set up, and 3 type of loan products, collateral free loan products are provided to micro and small enterprises, right? Shishu, Kishore, Tarun, right? So that is one type of reform. After that, CGT MSE portal has been established. 59-minute loan portal has been established. You also have priority sector lending to MSME sector. You have the concept of public procurement policy, where 25% of the procurement done by the government, that is the ministry or the department or a public sector enterprise, the procurement will happen from micro and small enterprises, etc. Right? So these are some of the very important reforms. Then we shifted to concept of services sector. Right? What is services? Intangible. Right? These are intangibles. So services sector, these are very important. I've given you the types of services. For example, broadcasting, right? Tourism services, software services, etc. The list is there. Should you by heart the list? Not required. Don't by heart the list. That is not at all required. Okay. Right. So understand this carefully. Services sector, these are intangibles in nature, and these are important for a simple reason. The contribution to GDP is very, very high. I said generally. Again, underline the term generally. More than 50% of the contribution to the GDP comes from services sector. Will it be constant? Absolutely no. There is nothing like a constancy in the economy in terms of contribution. From one year to next year, the contribution to GDP, of course, has to change. But how do you remember it then? Generally, around 50% plus is from services sector. Second, lot of the services are produced in India. These are exported as well as consumed in India, right? So because we export, it contributes to export. How many of you have read the statement given by the minister, right? Minister of Commerce, Mr. Goyal, where he says the total amount of goods and services, that is merchandise plus service exports from India, will be crossing more than $700 billion from India. Right? Please read that article. More than $700 billion. That's a very important achievement for Indian economy. Right? Because I've already told you, for the first time ever, last year, the total value of the merchandise exports from India, for the first time in the last year, crossed more than $400 billion. Right? So that's a very important achievement for Indian economy. So this year we are expecting the total value of the exports, that is both merchandise as well as services, to go beyond $700 billion. Sorry, correct. 400 plus 300, more than $700 billion. Please read that article. So coming back to the service sector, these are important. Contribution to exports, earns forex reserves, employment generation, attracted a lot of foreign direct investment, etc., etc., etc. Right? So apart from this, what are the problems in the service sector? What has Government of India done to protect and promote services sector? And that is where we have discussed, we have had a detailed discussion about two initiatives of Government of India. That is one, the concept of the Make in India, as well as the second one, the idea of a Startup India. Please have a look at the mind map again. Please be very, very clear with all these concepts. If a critical evaluation questions come, you can easily answer taking that particular data itself. Now, after that, we started with the concept of planning. The last 1 hour, we started with the concept of planning, right? What is planning? Simple. It's a process wherein government, in order to achieve the objectives, will arrange the resources. Simple. You know what are the resources you have. Using these resources, what you want to achieve, that concept is referred to, or that process is referred to as planning. Okay. Now, in case of India, right, we have followed a concept of 5-year plans. The Planning Commission was established in 1950, and the first 5-year plan was implemented from 1951. Even before 1950, there were different committees or experts who have given the recommendation of a plan in India. For example, we had a look at the first ever plan that was proposed for India, the 10-year plan that was proposed by Dr. M. Vishweshwaraya, right, wherein the proposal was to double the national income in the next 10 years. Right. Apart from that, we also have seen the recommendation given by National Planning Committee. We also have seen recommendations given by the businessman in the Bombay, which is famously referred to as Bombay Plan. But I've also told you, because it was a pre-independence era, we have not implemented any of them. Over a period of time, we have taken inspiration from many of the recommendations, included one or the other components in different plans. So 1950, we set up Planning Commission. 1952, we set up National Development Council. And these are the 12 5-year plans. Yesterday, if you remember, I even told you a trick. How do you remember all of these particular plans? Because suddenly, if I ask you, when did the 4th plan started to be, or what is the time period for the 4th 5-year plan? Suddenly, you'll get confused. If I ask you, what is the time period for the 8th 5-year plan? Suddenly, you might get confused. But how do you make a trick? I've told you. Try to divide these 5-year plans into 3 groups. Again, sir, it is fixed or what? Shall I make a different grouping? Entirely left to you. I hope you understand. It is entirely left to you. On what basis I have made this grouping? Simple. Whenever we have had a plan holiday, I hope you understand. Whenever we have taken a plan holiday, I've made one group like this. And it becomes easier to remember when you realize that in the 3 groups, the number of 5-year plans are in ascending order, 3, 4, and 5. 1951 to 1966, the first grouping. 1969 to 1990, the second grouping. And 1992 to 2017, that is the third grouping. In the first, there were 3. In the second group, there were 4. In the third group, there were five-year plans. Right, so this is what we have covered so far. Can we start now? Can we start? Now, I was just checking some of the questions that you people have asked yesterday. Some of you had asked a question, sir, you have given these particular 4 parameters or 4 long-term goals, right? In which of these 5-year plans these were actually recommended? Now, clearly stating, please understand this. There is not a single 5-year plan where all of these have been covered. In different 5-year plans, different goals have been mentioned. Is the logic okay? In different 5-year plans, different goals have been mentioned by the government. For example, if you talk about inclusive growth, and this we will discuss, by the way, next week. That is Saturday, we'll have a discussion on inclusive growth. Don't panic now. The concept of inclusive growth was mentioned as a central theme in the 11th 5-year plan and 12th 5-year plan. I hope you understand. The concept of inclusive growth was mentioned in 11th 5-year plan and 12th 5-year plan. What about equity? Within equity, if you look at this, income inequality. Within equity, if you look at the concept of income inequality, this was mentioned in the 4th 5-year plan. The reduction in the income inequality was actually mentioned in the 4th 5-year plan. What about modernization? The idea for modernization was mentioned in the 6th 5-year plan. It was mentioned in the 6th 5-year plan. What about self-reliance? This was mentioned in 3rd 5-year plan, 4th 5-year plan, 7th 5-year plan, etc. Right? So in this way, right, it's not that only one 5-year plan has all of these goals. What about growth? You should not be asking about growth here, right? Because I expect this kind of a question from some of the students. They'll say, sir, you told about equity, you told about modernization, and right, you told about self-reliance. You did not tell about growth. My dear, growth as a target was mentioned in all the 5-year plans. In every 5-year plan, of course, you want to achieve certain amount of growth, right? So these are certain important points. Now, when I say growth, this is one more table. Should you remember the whole table? Again, this is my recommendation to you people. Don't. Do not waste your time, right? Don't by heart the whole table. Why? It's not simply by hearting the numbers. I hope you understand the problem here. It's very complicated. In the sense, it's not just simply by hearting 2.1, 3.6, 5.6, 2.8, right? 6%, 6.7% like this. Absolutely no. You'll have to remember in sequence. That's the most toughest part. You'll have to remember in sequence, point 1, and you'll have to match them. You'll have to simply match them. You cannot simply say 2.1%, 4.3%. That would be a blunder. You are rewriting economic history then. So that's a reason. Do not by heart the table. And is there any potential of question being asked from this table? Yes. One type of question can be asked. In the first 5-year plan, did we overachieve the growth? Because first is always important. First 5-year plan anyways is important. Right? So in the first 5-year plan, what was the target? Did we achieve the target or not? And you can see the data. Yes, the target that was set up by the government of India, that is the Planning Commission, was 2.1%. We not only achieved the target, we overachieved the target at 3.6%. Now, second type of a question, just glance through the achieved target, actual target, right? That is, one is the target that was set up, and second one is what was actually achieved by the government. Now, one question that could be asked is, in which of the 5-year plans we hit a target of 6% GDP growth rate? 6%, that's psychologically important. I hope you understand. Psychologically very, very important. In which of the 5-year plan India was able to achieve a GDP growth rate of 6%? And you will realize that it is the 7th 5-year plan. It is the 7th 5-year plan. In the 7th 5-year plan, we were able to achieve 6% GDP growth rate. Right? So these kind of questions can be asked. Please be very careful. Just glance through the data. Although 12th 5-year plan, I've given the data here, 7%. 12th 5-year plan in midway itself was cut short by the government. It was cut short by the government. But anyways, certain experts have given the data of 7%. I've given the same data. Right? So this is the target that was set up for individually all the 5 years, and this was the actual GDP growth rate that was achieved in individual 5 years. Now, with this caveat, let me start. I'll be throwing a lot of factual information at you people now. Please be aware, right? Some concepts are required, certain important areas you need to discuss. You'll have to remember these concepts. Let's start. First 5-year plan we implemented from 1951 to 1956. 51 to 56. Now, initially to begin with, because we were dependent on agriculture imports, the inflation rate in case of Indian economy was slightly on a higher side. Government of India focused on agriculture sector. Simple, right? Keep it always simple. Government focused on agriculture sector to reduce import dependence, to basically control the inflation rate in the market, and moreover, it makes sense to focus on agriculture. Why? Please remember, more than 50% of GDP contribution came from agriculture sector. Is it okay? More than 50% of GDP contribution came from agriculture sector, and around 73% of the working population in India was involved in the agriculture sector. Is it okay? More than 50% of contribution to GDP came from agriculture sector, and just to be on a safer side, you can simply say more than 70% of the labor involved in the Indian economy was dependent or was involved in the agriculture sector. So government of India, looking at all of this, said, okay, let me focus on the concept of agriculture sector. And right, that was the precise reason the production, right, the production of agriculture sector, of production of food grains during the first 5-year plan, the production increased. The production in the agriculture sector actually increased, and to a very great extent we were able to control the food grain imports as well as inflation in the domestic market, right? And this was the time period even when government of India proposed a lot of irrigation projects, right? For example, Hirakud. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard of Hirakud Dam, Bhakranangal Dam, etc. So major irrigation projects were announced during the first 5-year plan itself. So these are the 4 points related to the first 5-year plan. But apart from the 4 points that I've given here, the next point is very important. The first 5-year plan is also associated with an economic model which is very famously referred to as Harrod-Domer model. Follow this concept. Very often questions have been asked on this. The first 5-year plan, and even to a very great extent second 5-year plan, is associated with the model of Harrod-Domer. Now, what is this Harrod-Domer model? Harrod was an economist and Domer was also a different economist. Both of them have given an economic model. But for our convenience, what we have done is we have basically clubbed the models of both of them and we treat it as a single model. Proposal. Model is nothing but proposal. Harrod-Domer model. Now, what does the Harrod-Domer model state? The Harrod-Domer model connects between 3 parameters in the economy. Understand this carefully. 3 parameters in the economy. That is, 1, the growth rate. Second one, the savings rate. And the third one is capital output ratio. I repeat, the Harrod-Domer model connects 3 very important parameters in the economy: the growth rate, savings rate, as well as the capital output ratio. Now, growth rate, everybody is clear. What I mean by growth rate is anybody having a doubt? Growth rate simply means from one time period to another time period, by how much percentage the GDP has changed. I hope you understand this. It's a very simple concept. Do not complicate it. G is growth rate. What is a growth rate? From one time period to another time period, by how much percentage GDP has changed. All of you have read about GDP very, very recently. Last week itself, there was a discussion about GDP growth rate, right? That is basically the growth rate. Point number 1. Second one is savings rate, right? What is the savings? How do you define savings? Simple. Whenever out of the total disposable income, please remember the term. Whenever you take a total disposable income and from the disposable income, if you remove the immediate expenditure, what is left out is savings. Anybody has a doubt, please do let me know. And by the way, you should not have the doubt regarding this. Why? We already have discussed it multiple times now. Out of the total disposable income, if you remove the immediate expenditure, what is left out is called as a savings. And what is this capital output ratio? Capital output ratio simply refers to the ratio of total expenditure, that is how much money that you have spent to get units of production in the market. I'll give an example. How much money you have spent to get number of units in the market. For example, have a look at this and I'll ask you a question. Be very careful. Imagine there are two manufacturers, A and B. Right? There are two manufacturers, A and B. A will spend, let's say, 10 rupees and he will get, let's say, output of 100 units. Right? Or else let's make it otherwise around. A will spend, let's say, 1000 rupees and he will get output of 100 units. And B will spend, let's say, 1500 rupees and B will get same number of units, 100 units. Now, can I basically use the CSAT, simple CSAT, and say that for every unit of product A has manufactured, for every unit of a product A has manufactured, A has spent 10 rupees. For every unit A has manufactured, A has spent 10 rupees. And for every unit of a production B has manufactured, B has spent 15 rupees. Any difficulty here? Any difficulty even in this CSAT calculation? Right? And I'm taking very simple numbers. So very difficult to calculate. Use calculator then. Use calculator, which I don't prescribe personally. Right? And even in the UPSC and CSAT paper, they will not allow you to use this. So A has spent 1000 rupees, manufactured 100 units. B has spent 1500 rupees, manufactured 100 units. So for every unit of production done by A has spent 10 rupees, and for every unit of production done by B has spent 15 rupees. This in simple terms is nothing but capital output ratio. Capital output ratio. Look at the name itself. Look at the name, you'll understand. Capital output ratio. That is how much money you have spent to get 1 unit of output. That is called as a capital output ratio. Now, simple question to you people. Who do you think is producing the goods efficiently? Focus on the numbers and it's not very difficult. Just apply common sense. Who do you think is utilizing the resources very efficiently, producing the goods very efficiently? All of you will agree, thanks a lot. Right, thanks a lot. All of you will agree A is producing the goods efficiently. Why? Look at the cost. Very simple. Look at the cost. A is spending 10 rupees, B is spending 15 rupees to manufacture a similar product. So obviously I'll come to a conclusion. A's efficiency is much better. Agreed? That is point number 1. And this is concept of a capital output ratio. That is how much capital you should spend to get 1 unit of output. Point number 2. Is it okay if I say if A will further reduce the capital output ratio? If A will reduce the capital output ratio further down, the total production in the economy will increase. Let me see. Right, the total production in the economy will increase. I'll repeat the statement again. If A will further reduce the capital output ratio, the production in the economy will increase. Sir, how? Rather than having 10 rupee per unit, what if I say the capital output ratio is 8 rupees per unit? What if I say it is 8 rupees per unit? It simply means spending same 1000 rupees rather than manufacturing 100 units. Now A has produced 125 units. Rather than producing only 100, A has produced 125. So with the decrease in the capital output ratio, Point number 1, production increases. Point number 2, GDP growth also increases. Let me know regarding point number 2. With reduction in the capital output ratio, if COR comes down, I'll use the short form now. With reduction in the COR, the production in the economy increases and the GDP growth rate also increases. Any disagreement? Anybody has a problem with this? Please do let me know now, because once you have understood this, there is nothing to understand in Harrod-Domer model. Is it okay? So understand the logic here. Harrod-Domer model discusses 3 parameters. It is connecting 3 parameters: growth, savings, as well as capital output ratio. Now, what is the connection here? Simple. If you want to increase the growth in the economy, I repeat, if you want to increase the growth in the economy, increase the savings rate and decrease the capital output ratio. I'll repeat it again. For achieving a higher growth in the economy, higher GDP growth rate, of course, what you need to do is increase the savings rate, reduce the capital output ratio. That is given in a formula which is given here. Growth is equal to savings divided by capital output ratio. And if you understand it, it's very basic idea. Growth is inversely related to capital output ratio and directly related to savings rate. If the savings rate in the economy increases, growth rate, right, generally is increasing. And if the capital output ratio decreases, the growth rate in the economy is seen to be increasing. Can I go forward here? Can I go to the next point here? Because this is a basic idea of a Harrod-Domer model, right? And once you have understood this, there is absolutely no problem. This is basically the idea of a Harrod-Domer model. How is core inversely related to growth? Then, my dear, please have a look at the formula, right? After discussing, after giving you a calculation, right? In books, they don't give you calculation. And should you remember the calculation for civil services? Absolutely no. Please look at it. If capital output ratio comes down, what has happened? What does it mean? The overall production in the economy increases. And if the overall production in the economy increases, can I say that the growth in the economy has also increased? Right? I hope you understand. It's basic CSAT calculation. If GDP increases, growth also increases. And what is the reason why GDP is increasing here? Because the capital output ratio is decreasing. Okay? So that is Harrod-Domer model. Okay? This is very important. Please remember this. In fact, at the end of the chapter, I'll show you a question. UPSC prelims, there was a question asked on the application of Harrod-Domer model. It was asked on the application of Harrod-Domer model. Now come to the next point. Apart from using capital output ratio, we also use one more term, incremental capital output ratio, ICAR. I'll start using the short form of this, ICAR. And those of you who are typing, sir, what is the long form of ICAR? It is given in the formula. Please have a look at it. Incremental capital output ratio, right? Incremental capital output ratio. So it is directly proportional. My dear, right? Then now I'll have to teach CSAT. Right? Now I'll have to simply teach CSAT. If capital output ratio reduces from 10 rupees to 8 rupees, GDP growth rate is increasing. Do you call this as a directly proportional or inversely proportional? I hope you understand it. If capital output ratio comes down from 10 rupees to 8 rupees and the GDP growth rate increases, on one side arrow mark is going down, on the other side arrow mark is going up. Do you call this as directly proportional or inversely proportional? Right, so it's inversely proportional. Okay, inversely proportional. Now, okay, apart from capital output ratio, we also use one more term, incremental capital output ratio. First and foremost, start with the basics here. What is incremental? Incremental means small change. Whenever you come across the term incremental, incremental generally refers to small change like this. Sir, what is the importance of incremental capital output ratio? Now have a look at this. follow the explanation because I'll ask you a question and participate. Easier way to understand all these concepts is to participate. Let's say from 1950 to 1980, you have spent, I'll take a simple number, you have spent 100 crore rupees. And as a result of your expenditure of 100 crore rupees, capital investment of 100 crore, you are able to produce, right? Let's say you are able to produce 10 crore number of units. The investment is how much? That is, the capital investment is 100 crore and your output is how much? 10 crore units. Now, simple question to you. Can you calculate capital output ratio? Is it okay? Can you calculate capital output ratio using the data? Again, it's very simple, right? 100 crore, right? Divide by 10 crore. For every unit, you are spending 10 rupee. That is a capital output ratio. But next question to you people. Tell me, is it possible for you to find out what is the effect of the capital that you have spent between 1979 and 80 using this data? Look at my next question. Right, total amount of investment between 1950 to 1980 is 100 crore, and as a result of this, total output is 10 crore. But my question to you is, tell me now, will you be able to find out what is the impact of the capital that you have invested between 1970 to 1980 using this data? Answer is simply no. You will not be able to come to know the impact of it. But don't you think you should be able to find out? Don't you think you should be able to find out? Why? For example, what if Government of India has implemented certain reforms to attract more and more investment in this 1 year? I hope you understand this. What if Government of India has implemented certain reforms in this year? Don't you want to measure what is the impact of that reform on output? What if the investment in this year has increased compared to previous years? How do you find out the impact of the output? Impact on the output? What if the labor availability has increased? Technological availability has increased. Technology has become much cheaper. Raw material has become much cheaper. Don't you want to find the impact of all of these changes only for 1 year? That is the precise reason. Understand the difference very carefully here. Whenever you talk about capital output ratio, you will take all the historical investment. Is it okay? Whenever you talk about capital output ratio, you are taking into consideration historical investment. But when you talk about incremental capital output ratio, you are not worried about historical investment. You are focused on specific time period. Your idea is to find out in last 2 years, in last 1 year, or last 5 years, how much investment I have done, and as a result of this, the production has increased by how much? Right? For example, have a look at this. Let's say in 1950, for every 1 unit of production that you are manufacturing, for every 1 unit of production, you are spending 10 rupee. For every 1 unit of production, you are spending 10 rupee. Now you are there in 2023. Simple question to you. What do you think should be the capital output ratio now? Should it be higher than 10 rupee or lower than 10 rupee? Let me see how your mind actually works. What do you think? Ideally, don't worry about fact. Fact I'll tell you. Ideally, what do you think should have happened? Should the capital output ratio, should it be lower or should it be higher? Right? The capital output ratio should be lower. Ideally, what is the fact? Don't worry. If you want to find out the efficiency, if you feel that, okay, technological improvement has helped the manufacturing sector, etc., what we expect is the capital output ratio now should be lower than what it was in 1950. Why? Because the kind of technology we were using in 1950, it was comparatively costlier, in the sense, I'm spending more money to purchase a machine, but the productivity is not very high. But today, can you imagine the kind of productivity that you will get in a machine compared to a machine in 1950? So of course, the logic is the capital output ratio over a period of time should decrease. But does it happen? What is the fact? Does it happen in a country such as India? The fact is opposite. In the context of India, just give me a second. In the context of India, generally it has been seen that the incremental capital output ratio, rather than decreasing, has started increasing, and that is a cause of concern. Is it okay? The incremental capital output ratio, rather than decreasing, in the context of India, it has been found to be increasing. Now, many of you will have a doubt. You will ask me, sir, why? Why is that the capital output ratio, or ICR, in the context of India, rather than decreasing, why is it increasing? Simple. Labor availability has become a problem. Right? A lot of these projects, they have launched, they have invested money, they have launched, but because of, let's say, Supreme Court judgment, or right, not getting government clearances, or because of various other agencies, the projects have got stalled. They are not able to implement it. Now you tell me, if the labor availability becomes a problem, cost of raw material increases, right? The projects are getting stopped, we are not able to complete the project. Do you think the capital output ratio will decrease? No, capital output ratio rather will start increasing. Right, so have a look at this. The incremental capital output ratio in the context of India has increased from 3.8 in 16 and 17 to 4.9 to 6.9 in 19 and 20. Okay, right, so these are certain important points regarding the concept of Harrod-Domer model. Any difficulty in understanding this HD model, right? Harrod-Domer model, please do let me know. Sir, incremental spelling. Arey, my dear, it is incremental. Okay. Sir, you have made a spelling mistake. Agreed. Okay, incremental. Okay. Again, these things you should automatically understand it. Right? Anyways, capital, there is a raw material cost include. No, in case of capital, we generally talk about, let's say, machineries. But again, understand this. Imagine you have invested, you have purchased a machine, but the raw material becomes very costly, or raw material availability is not there. You tell me what will happen to the output cost. I hope you understand, right? What will happen to the cost of output? Automatically the cost of output will go up. Okay, shall I go forward then? Shall I go forward? So these are the 5 points. First 5-year plan is important. That's the reason I'm spending so much of time here. So what are the important points? 1, right? Obviously it's a first 5-year plan, right? Second, this was implemented from 51 to 56. Third, agriculture sector was the major focus area in this, right? Because most of the economy was dependent on agriculture sector, and the contribution to the GDP from agriculture sector was higher. Next, we were able to increase the agriculture production. Irrigation projects were announced, or major irrigation projects were announced during this time period. Government, in addition to this, also basically took into the concept, or took into consideration, the model of Harrod-Domer to implement 5-year plans. First 5-year plan, second 5-year plan is associated with Harrod-Domer model. In addition to this, right, in addition to this, there is also a concept of land reforms. Please remember this. The discussion regarding the implementation of land reforms actually started in the first 5-year plan itself. Okay, so these are the important points. Let me go to the second 5-year plan now. Right, second 5-year plan, 56 to 61, right? Very famously also referred to as Mahalanobis strategy. And one more name for this second 5-year plan is heavy industrialization plan. Heavy industrialization plan. Okay, so second 5-year plan, heavy industrialization plan, or Mahalanobis strategy, or Mahalanobis plan, all are one and the same. Now, before explaining what is this idea of a Mahalanobis strategy or heavy industrialization plan, here are important points. Whenever you talk about industries, you will come across one classification: heavy industries and light industries. Heavy industries and light industries. Now, what is the basic idea of a heavy industry and a light industry? Simple. Whenever you are going to invest a huge amount of money, wherever investment requirement is very high, Point number one. Labor requirement is also very, very high. And third, wherever the output, that is the total production done, is also very, very high, these are generally referred to as heavy industries. I'll repeat it again. What do you mean by heavy industries? Wherever investment requirement, labor requirement, and the total investment and the labor requirement are very, very high. And third, the output from this is also very, very high. These are called as heavy industries. Any example of this? Steel, right? Production of steel, right? Or shipbuilding, etc. How many of you think, right, companies such as Vedanta, right, companies such as Adani's, etc., they're investing very small amount of money. Let's say they set up a steel production plant. Do you think they're going to invest a very, very small amount, or let's say 5 crore rupees, 10 crore rupees to manufacture steel, produce steel? If you say yes, then wake up. Please wake up. Please read the newspapers. You will understand. Thousands of crores of rupees they actually invest. So investment requirement not small. It's very huge amount of investment. Labor requirement is also high. And the output from this sector is also very, very high. Hence called as heavy industries. And whenever you look at the other side of it, right, whenever the investment requirement is lower, right, output is also comparatively lower, and the labor requirement is also comparatively lower, we call this as light industries. Heavy industries and light industries. Now please understand this, why it is required to understand what was proposed under the second 5-year plan. Just like in the first 5-year plan, even here the concept was simple. We want to increase the production in the domestic market. Okay, we want to increase the production in the domestic market. Why? The import dependence was very, very high. Import dependence was very, very high. So what we decided was, one, we will increase the production of goods in the domestic market, point number one. Second, because if we increase the production in the domestic market, it simply means investment in the market is going to increase, employment generation is going to increase, the people are going to earn more amount of income, and they are going to consume lot of goods and services, which will again increase the production. But now the concern was, how do we increase employment? Who should be allowed to invest in India? Can you please recall the industrial policy of 1956? Go back now. Can you please recall the industrial policy of 1956? What was done in industrial policy of 1956? Most of the industries which were earlier given to the private sector for production purposes now were taken away, were kept under the control of the government of India. Simple. This is how you connect dots. Most of them were kept under the control of government of India, 17 industries. And when these were kept under the control of government of India, you tell me who is going to invest in these industries? Who is going to drive production in the economy? Who is going to drive growth, employment in the economy? It will be government of India. Any difficulty in understanding this? It has to be obviously government of India. So one, we wanted to invest heavily in some of these heavy industries, right? We wanted to invest huge amount of money, and that was of course done, driven by government of India. And the objective was, we will produce a lot of it so that our import dependence will come down. Our import dependence will automatically come down, right? And the employment will also be driven up, and the consumption, right, demand for goods and services automatically will increase. That is the reason, have a look at this. Under this, right, under the concept of Mahalanobis strategy, we targeted investment in heavy industries as well as consumer goods also. I hope you understand why did we target consumer goods here. We targeted heavy industries as well as consumer goods segment. The argument was very simple. Heavy industries such as steel production, because the import dependence, production will increase, automatically import dependence will come down. But when we are going to promote employment here, people are going to earn salaries, they are going to demand lot of consumer goods, right, such as TV, such as a tape recorder. Of course, TV was not very much relevant at that point of time. Tape recorders, right? Those are consumer goods. So should we again continue to import consumer goods? No, we will promote the production of consumer goods as well in the domestic market. That is a precise reason. Remember the next point here. Second 5-year plan is also associated with the concept of two-sector model. Remember this. This is also referred to as a two-sector model. What is this two-sector model? The two sectors which were covered under the second 5-year plan were heavy industries as well as consumer goods segment. Any problem in understanding this? Please do let me know. Right, so it was referred as a heavy industrialization plan or Mahalanobis strategy. Sir, why it was referred as a Mahalanobis strategy? Simple. There was a statistician in India, PC Mahalanobis, and it was this statistician who provided this idea, or who was the main person behind the formulation of second 5-year plan. That is the reason it is called as a Mahalanobis plan, Mahalanobis strategy. So second 5-year plan focused on heavy industries and consumer goods segment. The objective was increase investment and increase overall GDP of Indian economy. And that is a precise reason. Have a look at this. At this point of time, that is in the second 5-year plan, we proposed steel plants in India. We proposed setting up of lot of steel plants, such as steel plant at Rourkela, Bhilai and Durgapur. This was the basic idea of a second 5-year plan. Now, was it successful? Was the second 5-year plan successful? Please have a look at the table, you will understand. I'll go back to the slide, don't worry. Was the second 5-year plan successful? Of course, no. The target that we wanted to achieve was 4.5%. Did we achieve the target? Absolutely no. We ended up achieving only 4.3%. In fact, not just by GDP growth rate, experts say that second 5-year plan was a very big failure of Indian economy, or it was a very big failure in the Indian economy. Why? The argument is we wanted to create employment. Have a look at this. We wanted to create employment, right? There was no policy that was followed by the government. There was no framework that was followed by the government which they should follow to create employment. There was absolutely no policy. They basically assume that trickle down will happen and we will get the benefit. The whole economy will get the benefit. That biggest failure, one reason, labor policy was not there. Employment framework was not there at that point of time. Second one, we assume that government will invest. Anyways, government invested. And even the private sector will also invest because Schedule B industries are there. But if you remember, yesterday I've told you, at this point of time, majority of the Indian economic contribution came from agriculture sector and only around 17% came from industries. But more important than that is the savings rate in the Indian economy. The savings rate in case of Indian economy were not very high. They were very, very low. Savings rate were very low. So when in a country you have a very low savings rate, you want to increase the savings rate so that the overall growth will increase. That will not happen. Right? So no clear framework for labor generation. There was no concept of, the issue was savings rate was very, very low. Third one, we wanted to reduce import dependence. We wanted to reduce import dependence. We said we will produce consumer goods in India. We will produce steel in India, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is, during the second 5-year plan, we ended up importing a lot of goods from the international market. So that is the precise reason the experts agree that the second 5-year plan was a thorough failure. In fact, it was cut short somewhere in the middle itself. Right? So this is a discussion regarding second 5-year plan. Any doubts here? First 5-year plan, second 5-year plan. Right? Again, now some of you, whenever I discuss, some of you try to find, right, let's say a problem area and try to, right, find out, or let's say try to put me in that particular problem area. Right? I've discussed the concept of heavy industries and light industries. Now there's a question. Tell me this sector will fall where? Tell me this sector will fall where? My dear, in many of the sectors, you will see both the kinds of investment. Right? I hope you understand. You will see both the kinds of investment. There will be certain companies who will invest very heavily, such as, let's say, a steel manufacturing plant. And in some of the sectors, you will see huge investment also, small amount of investment also. In that, you cannot categorically say this part will fall here, this part will fall here, right? Okay. Savings were low cause most of the population was in agriculture. Yes, of course, yes. Right. Again, when you study about modern India, and again, even if you have not studied modern India now, that should be very clear to you. Why? In high school, I'm pretty sure you have read about the tenancy reforms. That is basically the land revenue model that was followed by British government. Most of the population at this point of time which was working was basically dependent on agriculture sector. Do you think the amount of income that was earned by the farmers was given all to the farmers? How many of you think that was possible before 1947? Right? How many of you think that was the situation? It simply means that you don't even remember your high school now. Right? Do you remember the landlord model? Right? That is basically the tenancy reforms that were implemented by various British governments. Most of the revenue which was earned by the farmers was taken away by the government, and they basically snatched it away. Right? Our best example, Lagan. Right? I hope you remember the movie Lagan at least. Right? So when most of the population that is working is dependent on agriculture, they do not have sufficient income to take care of their household. Do you think they will invest? Do you think they will invest in the agriculture? Obviously no. Right? So savings rate were very, very low at this point of time. Okay. Okay. So let me go forward now. This is a second 5-year plan. Questions have been asked on this. Please be very, very careful. Why? These are important plans. These are very, very important plans. Now, apart from two sector model, let me go a bit deeper into this, right? Optional level. What Government of India further did was, again, don't do PhD on this. Take it as a fact, by heart it. What they basically did was, they took the consumer goods and they divided the consumer goods into three types. I repeat, they took the consumer goods and divided the consumer goods sector into three types. So have a look at this. The consumer goods segment was divided into three types. That was referred to as a C1, C2 and C3. Okay. So consumer goods segment were divided into three types. And the heavy industries, they refer to this as K industries. Again, why sir, why this? Don't worry, just understand the fact here. They refer to this as a K sector or K industries. Now have a look at this. One way to look at the second 5-year plan is two sectors were covered. Is it okay? Two sectors were covered. But further I said, when you look into the deeper aspect of the second 5-year plan, what the government did was, they divided the consumer goods into three types, C1, C2, C3. These were the three sectors, and they call this heavy industries as one more K sector. So they can use the term two sector model, or they can also use the term four sector model. Is it okay? Let me know. They can use the term two sector model, right? Sir, how they will ask the question on this? Simple, have a look at this. The two sector model is associated with which of the following 5-year plan? Simple. Two sector model is associated with which of the following 5-year plan? This is one type of a question. Second type of a question, four sector model, right, is associated with which of the following 5-year plan? This is one kind of a question. Another way to ask is, the term two sector model referred to in the second 5-year plan refers to what? They will give you, right, heavy industries, consumer goods, right, A, B, C, D like this. You'll have to find out which is the right option. Any problem with this? Right, so two sector model, four sector model. Now beyond this, let me add one more very important point here. There were two economists, and again, because the second 5-year plan was a failure, there were many critics of it. But one set of critics is very often regarding the second 5-year plan. That is, there were two economists by the name of Brahmananda and Vakil. Right? There were two economists by the name of Brahmananda and Vakil. And in fact, in various books, not in the books that you people generally read, but bigger books, they refer to the strategy that was given by them as a Brahmananda strategy. The strategy that was given by them, they will refer to this as a Brahmananda strategy. And what was the strategy? What was their criticism of the second 5-year plan? This is their argument, follow it. If you look at the Indian economy at this point of time, that is during 1950s, most of the contribution comes from whom? Agriculture sector, that is farmers. All of you will agree? Most of the contribution comes from agriculture, not industries. It comes from agriculture sector. And what about the income earned by the farmers? What about income earned by the farmers? Income earned by the farmers is very, very low. And what is the per capita income of whole of India? It's also on a very low level. So their argument was, we should not target industries. I hope you understand. In order to promote the growth in the Indian economy, we should not start directly targeting industries. We should first focus on certain sectors where labor is concentrated and ensure that the products or the goods that this population requires, the production of this increases. I'll repeat it again, follow this carefully. Their argument is, most of the population is there in agriculture sector. Per capita income of India is very, very low. We should not target heavy industries now, because you require a lot of savings for that. You require to mobilize a lot of savings so that you can convert them into investment. That is not possible. Then what should we target? Try to target production of those goods or those products which are majorly consumed by this population. And have a look at this. These kind of products or goods, they called it as wage goods. They call these goods as wage goods. What is the idea of wage goods? Those kind of goods which are consumed by a common man. Common man. Sir, what do you mean by that? Clothes, food grains, etc. All of you will agree? Clothes and food grains. Don't you think every person, irrespective of their income, will try to consume certain amount of food grains, a certain amount of clothes? So their argument was, don't target heavy industries. We don't require it. Why? When our agriculture sector is strong enough, right? When the population has a lot of savings, when you can move the savings, convert them into investment, you can promote industries. But right now, what we require is certain types of goods which are majorly consumed by common man. These were referred to as wage goods. And the best example of a wage good is clothing as well as food grain. The food grain production, that is agriculture sector, was the main target in the first 5-year plan. But that was not the main target in the second 5-year plan. We shifted to heavy industrialization. So their argument is, no, please do not promote heavy industrialization. Promote more and more production of wage goods. And they said, people who have money, people who are earning wages, income like this, they will consume a lot of food grains. They will purchase a lot of clothes like this. So increase the production of these. They will consume it. And later, right, when the incomes, per capita incomes will increase, you can promote heavy industries. This was the strategy that was given by Mr. Brahmananda and Mr. Vakil, very famously referred to as a concept of Brahmananda strategy. And that is exactly what you will see in the third 5-year plan. Have a look at the third 5-year plan. Right, have a look at the third 5-year plan. In the third 5-year plan, the government again focused back on agriculture sector. That the government again focused back on the agriculture sector. Now government said, we will start promoting agriculture sector. That will be our central theme now. Right? Why? What was the reason to promote agriculture sector? Simple. Import dependence is very high. We are importing a lot of food grains. Do you remember the PL 480? Do you remember the concept of PL 480? Public Law 480. This was one of the food programs. Simple. This was one of the food aid program. Food aid program that was run by government of USA. Right? Government of USA. And please understand this. Right? Under this food aid program, we used to get a lot of food grains from USA. So government of India said, let me focus back again on agriculture sector. Let me promote agriculture sector. And this was actually the time period when we started bringing in the idea of green revolution in India. I hope you understand. From third 5-year plan, that is basically from 1960s, the concept of green revolution was promoted in India. But anyways, right, achieve self-sufficiency, increase the production in the domestic market, so that again the logic is simple, import dependence will come down. Promote production, will go for import substitution. Right, but apart from this, also look at this, we also started promoting basic industries. Now you will ask me a question, sir, what do you mean by basic industries? Simple, right? Have a look at the example here. Imagine here is a company, it is producing something, a good is produced. This good is not sold to us directly, it will be used as a, let's say, a raw material. Majorly it will be used as a raw material in some other sector. So those industries who will produce something and this is used as a raw material in somebody else or in some other industry, these are referred to as basic industries. These are referred to as basic industries, right? Such as paper production, sugar production, etc. So government started promoting production of basic industry through basic industries in India. Agriculture sector was again the focus in the third 5-year plan. But was it successful? Were we able to implement all the targets in the third 5-year plan? Again, the answer is no. Why? At this point of time, understand this. One, there was a recession in the Indian economy and there was a reason for it. Multiple years, rainfall was very less in India. We experienced drought-like situations. Famine-like situations were observed in India. Right. In addition to this, this was the time period, that is the third 5-year plan was the time period when India fought 2 wars, one with China and second one with Pakistan. Yesterday also we have discussed this. And because we were fighting wars, there was a drought, a famine-like situation, etc., etc. The third 5-year plan was also a failure in case of India. And that is the precise reason I told you, after the third 5-year plan, we discontinued the concept of 5-year plans. Is it okay? After the third 5-year plan, we discontinued the concept of 5-year plans. Rather than having 5-year plans, now we said, okay, let's discontinue it. Let's have annual plans. So from 66 to 69, right, we had 3 annual plans instead of 5-year plans. Done? Right, so this is third 5-year plan. Any issue with the story? Try to remember this like a story. It is easier. Do not by heart everything. If you try to by heart, trust me, right? By now, I think I've covered around 15 points. In 3 5-year plans, I've covered 15 points. You'll find it very difficult to remember all the 15 points in sequence. That's very important. Some of you will simply say, no, sir, I will by heart all the 15 points. My dear, it's not just by hearting 15 points. You'll have to by heart them in sequence. For example, Harrod-Domer model. When you by heart, Harrod-Domer model should not be there in the 12th 5-year plan. You're wrong then. I hope you understand. The Harrod-Domer model should not be there in the 12th 5-year plan. It should be there in the first and second 5-year plan. Mainly focus on first. Right? The concept of, let's say, Mahalanobis plan, heavy industrialization plan, it should not come to 11th 5-year plan. It should be there in the second 5-year plan. Inclusive growth should not be there in the beginning. It should be there in the bottom 11th and 12th 5-year plan. So please be very, very careful. Right, what are the 4 sectors? 4 sectors are simple. Consumer goods were divided into 3 parts, C1, C2, C3, 3 sectors. Heavy industries was referred as a K sector, 4th sector. Right, so initially 2 sectors, heavy and consumer. Right, consumer is further divided into 3, 3 plus 1, 4 sector. Okay, what is basic industry? Again, I'll repeat it. Basic industries are those industries where the output of these will be used in some other industries, right? That is the reason these are referred as a basic industries. Okay, can I go to the next one? 4th 5-year plan. Concept of 4th 5-year plan, which was implemented from 69 to 74. 69 to 74. Now, what is the importance of 4th 5-year plan? Point number 1. In the 4th 5-year plan, we implemented something called as a Gargill formula. Remember this. We implemented something called as a Gargill formula. And what is the importance of Gargill formula? Central government, that is the planning commission of the central government, will implement 5-year plans. Done? They will implement 5-year plans. Now, in the implementation process, even the states are involved. Now, when the 5-year plans are supposed to be implemented, don't you think certain funds will have to go to even the state governments? All of you will agree? Funds will have to be allocated to state governments. Sir, why? Why should the funds be allocated? Simple. Let me ask you this. Imagine you are the state government, you are the chief minister now, and I am the planning commission. I have proposed a 5-year plan. Under that, one infrastructure project is supposed to be implemented in the state as a part of 5-year plan. Now tell me, who will finance it? Who will fund that particular project? Don't you think the central government should allocate the funds to you? So that is the precise reason. Have a look at this. That's a precise reason. Now there was a requirement of deciding how the funds would be given to states for implementing 5-year plans. And some of you now you will take this, get it confused with the Finance Commission. Both are different. Please do not be confused. I hope you understand this. Under the Finance Commission, the objective is, how do I divide the taxes? Simple. Under the Finance Commission, the objective is, how do I divide the tax receipts between the center and state? It is not discussing that. The Gadgil formula was given, right? Again, sir, why it is called as a Gadgil? The person who recommended this is basically named Gadgil. That's it. So Gadgil formula gives, right, the formula or through which the Planning Commission will allocate the funds to respective state governments for the implementation of 5-year plans. So point number 1, which is very important for the 4th 5-year plan, was Gadgil strategy or Gadgil formula was implemented for the distribution of funds for the implementation of 5-year plans. Point number 1. Second point, I have not written it, but please remember this. The 4th 5-year plan was also the plan when Government of India started implementing population control measures. Population control measures. Remember this, can be asked. This was also the 5-year plan when Government of India started promoting lot of population control measures. Sir, how do I remember it? Very difficult. How do I remember everything? When you read about polity, for those of whom it is already over, it is very easy. For others, connect the dots here. Whenever you read about the points regarding, let's say, election of president in India, right, or let's say the delimitation of, right, the constituencies in India, what is the base? Which year population is taken as a base in case of India? You will take a base of 1971 population. Agreed? At least for those of you whom it is over, it should be very easy for you to connect. Right? And for others for whom it is not over, don't worry. Whenever you read polity, there is one base here that is taken, that is population, that is taken as a reference point for many things in polity. That is the base of 1971. Now look at the year. Now look at the time period of 4th 5-year plan, you will automatically understand. I understand. Look at the time period of the 4th 5-year plan, you will connect the dots. So 4th 5-year plan is also known for what? It is also known for the promotion, that is implementation of various population control measures, or also famously referred as family planning in India. Please remember that. Right? That is second point. Third, as usual in the 4th 5-year plan, we wanted to achieve the growth of, achieve the target of self-reliance. We wanted to achieve growth, etc. Right? Apart from this, we also went for nationalization of the banking sector. We have discussed this. 1969 and 70, we went for nationalization of the banking sector. We promoted green revolution at this point of time, right, etc. Right? Apart from this, under this, the Government of India wanted to increase the standard of living of the people, increase the incomes earned by the people, etc. Now, the plan also recommended regional level as well as local level planning. That is at regional level, that is at the lowest level, we should be able to implement certain plans. Right? That was basically the idea of regional as well as local level planning, and the discussion regarding Panchayati Raj institutions also started. Right? The importance of PRIs, Panchayati Raj institutions, also started during the period of 4th 5-year plan itself. So these are certain important points regarding 4th EFIP. Please remember this. Again, if I want to bet, if I want to remember these points, I will not focus on these things. Right? Growth was targeted in every 5-year plan. You cannot tell me there was a 5-year plan where growth was not targeted. And sir, but self-reliance was not targeted in all of them. If you remember the earlier slide itself, I've told you. Self-reliance was targeted in multiple 5-year plans, right? So one of them is 4th 5-year plan. In 3rd 5-year plan, it was there. 4th 5-year plan, it was there. In 7th 5-year plan, also it was there. Okay, so there are multiple 5-year plans where self-reliance was also targeted by the government, right? So these are certain points regarding the 4th 5-year plan. Next, important, 5th 5-year plan. Why? I'll tell you. 5th 5-year plan is important, right? Why? Look at the time period. First and foremost, you'll understand it. This was the time period when government basically had enforced emergency. Government had enforced emergency. Point number 1. Second point, Government of India now realized that from the first 5-year plan, we have tried to implement a concept of trickle-down theory. Do you remember that? We have discussed this yesterday. From the first 5-year plan, what we have done is, we have tried to implement trickle-down theory. It has not worked. Number of people who are poor in case of India continues to remain higher. So in that case, what we should do? What can be done here? Simple. Government of India decided to have a different approach. That is, rather than only following trickle down, now Government of India started implementing a lot of these measures wherein we are going to directly target poor people. Is it okay? We are going to try to alleviate poverty. We are going to try to target these poor people, provide them certain reforms or measures, try to alleviate, right? Basically push them into above poverty levels as such. Right, so that was the basic idea which we'll observe, right, in the 5th 5-year plan, very much evident in the 6th 5-year plan and thereafter. So first one, right, poverty alleviation. In fact, the punchline, right, the election punchline which was used by Mrs. Indira Gandhi was basically Garibi Hatao, right? So Garibi Hatao, self-reliance, poverty alleviation, these are some of the areas. But in addition to this, remember next points. In the 5th 5-year plan, Government of India implemented a program called as 20-point program. Is it okay? I'll repeat it. In the 5th 5-year plan, Government of India implemented a program called as 20-point program. In fact, it was there in the newspaper, right, many years ago. Not recently, many years ago. Why? It was implemented during during this particular period of 5th 5-year plan. Later, when Mr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, again the idea for 20-point program was revamped and again implemented by the Manmohan Singh government. Now, what is the idea for 20-point? Should we remember 20 points? Please don't remember. Please don't waste your time. Do not remember. Very common things, very basic things. Apply common sense, you'll understand. For example, slum development. Don't you think that has to be there in a 20-point program? Education, right? Providing drinking water. Right? Don't you think these kind of points will have to be there in 20 points? Either ways, right? Whenever any government implements a 20-point program and they want to alleviate poverty, you tell me what kind of areas will they cover? Education, healthcare, drinking water, right? Schooling, etc., etc. Women empowerment, providing jobs. These are the common things, right? So the same areas were covered even under the 20-point program, right? So Government of India at this point of time, having a central theme of eradicating, right, or alleviating poverty, implemented the concept of 20-point program, right? Apart from this, the government also focused on promotion of employment generation, right? The government also focused on self-reliance, right? How many times will you come across the idea of self-reliance? In the last 2 plans, again, the idea of self-reliance was there. Government also implemented a program by the name of IRDP, Integrated Rural Development Program. IRDP, Integrated Rural Development Program. Now, please understand this. Some of you not now, when you read any book, you will see that the book will say that IRDP was implemented in this plan. IRDP was implemented in this plan, etc., etc. But the fact, when did IRDP actually originate? The origin of IRDP will be from 5th 5-year plan itself. Integrated Rural Development Program was launched by the government in the fifth 5-year plan, initially it covered very less number of villages like this, or the area coverage was very less. Over a period of time, in subsequent 5-year plans, the coverage has been expanded. Now, please understand this. Many of you will start typing, sir, tell me about IRDP. Should you read IRDP? Not required. It is nowhere required for, right, a detailed discussion for civil services. But suddenly they could ask you, IRDP was right implemented in which of the following 5-year plans? That could be asked. The right answer is fifth 5-year plan. Fifth 5-year plan, important. Please remember this. Okay. Now, apart from this, stabilizing the prices, controlling the inflation rate, right? And these were the important areas, important targets of the government. 1978, the government of India basically revamped the fifth 5-year plan, discontinued the fifth 5-year plan, and from 1978 they implemented, that is the new government implemented a rolling plan or a continuous planning. Yesterday we have discussed this. They implemented a rolling plan or a continuous planning, right, wherein every year the plan would keep on undergoing changes based on the experience in the previous year. And that was implemented for a period of 2 years. Again, the new government came to power, and as a result of this, even this particular continuous planning was replaced with another full-fledged plan, that is the sixth 5-year plan that was implemented from 1980. Done. So these are important points regarding the fifth 5-year plan. Now the sixth 5-year plan, important. 80 to 85, it is important. Why? I'll tell you. Follow these points very carefully. The sixth 5-year plan was the first ever 5-year plan to provide funds for reducing regional disparities. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. The concept of regional disparities was discussed in multiple 5-year plans, but it was the sixth 5-year plan which focused on the reduction in the regional disparities and provided funding for it, allocated funds basically to reduce the regional disparities. That is one very important point, and I hope you understand what do you mean by regional disparities. For example, in your own state, you must have seen certain parts of the state will be very well developed, industrially very good, growth will be very high, per capita income in those parts of the state will be very high, but in other parts of the state, incomes will be very, very low. And that is basically a regional imbalance. But I'm talking about only one state. You can apply the same thing to whole of India. Right? How many of you heard of a Bimaru state? Let me see. How many of you heard of Bimaru states? Start answering. How many of you have heard of the concept of Bimaru states? Right? Bimaru states were those states which were falling behind, lagging behind in development indicators. Very, very poor in development indicators. So even at this point of time, we could simply say that in the whole of India, there were certain states which were very much poor in terms of development indicators, and there were certain states such as, let's say, Maharashtra, Gujarat, right, or even for that matter other southern states which was very much in terms of industrial growth rate as well as the development growth rate, they were leading, right? So there was a huge imbalance, there was a huge inequality in development indicators like this. So in order to address these regional disparities, reduce regional disparities, for the first time in a 5-year plan, the funds were allocated by the government. Please remember that. And the sixth 5-year plan is also known for focusing on gender empowerment. Is it okay? It is also the first ever plan to focus on gender empowerment. That is, we suddenly started realizing that, okay, right, the genders, there is an imbalance between these two genders. So gender empowerment was also discussed in the sixth 5-year plan, right? So first, regional disparities, we wanted to address it. Second one is, it was the first plan to talk and promote gender empowerment. And please understand this, right? Instead of gender empowerment, they will also say women empowerment. They will also use the term women empowerment. It was the first 5-year plan to discuss and promote idea of women empowerment. Okay, so apart from this, focus was now slowly shifting to promoting development of infrastructure, right? Continuation of various social welfare measures such as IRDP. In fact, right, many other social welfare measures were also implemented. For example, NREP was implemented at this sixth five-year plan, National Rural Employment Program, and minimum needs program were also implemented. Right? So these are certain very, very important points regarding sixth five-year plan. In addition to this, in addition to all these points, I have not given it, but please make a note of this or remember this. At least go through the annotations and remember it. Northeastern states. Northeastern states. The sixth five-year plan. Any doubts? I'm just looking at your comments. Any doubts? Okay. Northeastern states were also discussed. Right? The northeastern states were also part of the discussion, which is going to start now. Okay. Done. So this is the discussion regarding the concept of sixth five-year plan. Can I go to the next one? 5 more plans. Then you are done. 5 more plans, then you are done. All the 12 five-year plans will be over for you. Don't worry. 7th five-year plan, 85 to 90. Right, the 7th five-year plan, 85 to 90 here. What are the important points in the 7th five-year plan? I'll tell you certain points here. Please make a note of this. It was the first five-year plan where the GDP growth rate achieved was 6%. I hope you remember this. It was the first five-year plan where the GDP growth rate that was achieved was 6%. And in the financial year 89, not 90, financial year 89, which is part of the 7th five-year plan itself, agriculture sector for the first time ever registered a double-digit GDP growth rate. Sorry, double-digit growth rate, not GDP growth rate. Agriculture sector for the first time ever registered a double-digit growth rate, 10.4%. Right, so the 7th five-year plan is known for numbers here. Please remember this. First number is the GDP growth rate that we were able to achieve was 6% for the first time ever. And some of you will be wondering why it is so important. Please have a look at this. After the first 3 decades, of planning implementation in India, the average growth rate in case of India was 3.4%. I'll repeat it. After the first 3 decades of implementation of planning in India, the growth rate on an average was 3.4%. And there comes one full 5 year where we were able to achieve 6% GDP growth rate. Right? That is a precise reason the 7th five-year plan is very well known for this number. And in addition to this 3.4%, please remember, there is this idea which is referred to as Hindu growth rate or Hindu rate of growth. Hindu rate of growth. Right? Hindu rate of growth. Generally, whenever the growth rate is around 3.5%, right? Somewhere around 3.5%, this is referred to as Hindu rate of growth. And the term Hindu rate of growth was coined by a professor by the name of Professor Raj Krishna. Professor Raj Krishna. Sir, why are you mentioning all of this? Can be asked in prelims. Can be asked in prelims. Now, some of you, as expected, have started asking, sir, why this is called as a Hindu rate of growth? It is more to do with Shastras. Don't get into this. Philosophical idea was given by Professor Raj Krishna, and they basically gave this idea of a Hindu rate of growth. Again, not required. Philosophy is not required in the GS paper 3. Okay, right? So objective was basically to promote growth, modernization, and self-reliance. Right? You will come across the term modernization here. Right? So priority was given for work as well as food productivity. Right? The continuous focus on infrastructure development. We started focusing on infrastructure in the 6th five-year plan. That continued here. Okay. We also promoted small-scale industries, food processing industries at this point of time, and various other programs such as Jawahar Rozgar Yojana were also launched and implemented during the 7th five-year plan. Done? Right. So these are certain very important points regarding the 7th five-year plan. In addition to this, 6%, 10.4%. Okay. Make one more point. Remember one more point here. The private sector investment started increasing. Private sector investment started increasing. Why this is important? Understand the evolution. Starting from industrial policy of 1956, you tell me, who do you think invested heavily in Indian economy? I hope you understand this. I'll repeat the statement here again. Starting from let's say the 1956 industrial policy of 1956, who do you think invested heavily in the Indian economy? It has to be the government. It has to be the public sector. It has to be public sector. But this was the first 5-year plan. That is the 7th 5-year plan was the first 5-year plan where public sector investment actually went down. Public sector expenditure, public sector investment went below 50% and private sector investment started picking up. And you will see that after the 7th 5-year plan, in the 8th, 9th, 10th, that has been the trend. That has been the trend. You will generally see that private sector investment keeping above 50% and public sector investment being below 50%. Right? So these are certain very important points regarding the 7th 5-year plan. Can I go to the next one? Right? What is Hindu rate of growth? Again, I'm saying there is a philosophical argument. Can you understand my statement? There is a philosophical argument given that is not needed. You don't have to understand philosophy. Right? Basically, it was related to Hinduism. Again, not required in economics. Please go forward. Okay. 8th 5-year plan, 92 to 97. COR reduces if not capital infused and same output as usual year by year. Again, I do not understand the statement. Please clarify. What are you trying to say? I don't understand the statement. Please clarify that. 8th 5-year plan, 92 to 97. Now, one very important point, anyways, you will know this, is LPG reforms. Right? LPG reforms was implemented during this particular phase itself. Apart from this, we were able to achieve a very, very good growth rate during this particular phase. Right? 6.8% we were able to achieve. Next, right, faster growth in manufacturing sector, agriculture as well as allied sectors. Right? We were able to promote a lot of investment. Right? We were able to promote a lot of investment. Private sector investment was more than 50% of the total investment in the Indian economy. We were able to implement a lot of policies. Infrastructure development, as usual, 6th 5-year plan, it has continued. Even infrastructure development will be a focus here. Agriculture sector was also given importance under this. Manufacturing sector was also promoted. Right? So improvement in trade as well as a current account deficit. Exports improved from India. Right? So these are certain very important points regarding 8th 5-year plan. And again, what we have learned in LPG reforms, you're writing the same thing here. I don't say, sir, right, all of these you have not discussed. LPG reforms, you tell me what will happen as a result of LPG reforms. Manufacturing sector was promoted. I've written that. Exports, right, situation of exports improved. Yes, right, the current account deficit was very, very high. Reforms were implemented. Current account deficit was narrowing. It was brought down. That I've written. Infrastructure anyways has been promoted by the government since the 6th 5-year plan. That is also part of it. Private sector investment was more than 50% in the 7th 5-year plan. Will continue to happen even in the 8th 5-year plan. Right? So these are certain very important points regarding 8th 5-year plan. 8th 5-year plan. Okay. Any doubts? Any doubts? Any other doubts that you people have? Let me know. No doubts. In which plan the northeastern states were focused on? Multiple plans are there, right? One of the plan that I've written here is basically the 6th 5-year plan. And again, in many other plans also, again, discussion has happened. In many other plans, we have allocated funds. We have basically told, right, these states funds will be used for these purposes. Later on, you will come across that later on. Okay, so 9th 5-year plan. It was announced in the 50th year of independence. Right? That should be very clear to you. Right? 1997, 2002. Right? 1947, we got independence, and the 9th 5-year plan was announced in the 50th year of independence. Now, apart from that, under this 9th 5-year plan, Government of India basically said, we will try to ensure that certain basic minimum requirements will be provided to all the households in India, especially poor households. For example, have a look at this: healthcare facilities, safe drinking water, public housing assistance, etc. So we identified, right, certain minimum requirements, and the government stated that in the 9th 5-year plan will be able to provide, all of these basic minimum requirements to households. In addition to this, make one more point here. I just forgot to tell you, 8th 5-year plan. right? 8th 5-year plan is very well known, right? Why? In the 8th 5-year plan, it was the first 5-year plan to promote universal adult education. Universal education, right? Important. Sir, what is, okay, again, Hindu growth rate. Don't worry. That's what I'm saying. Don't worry about Hindu growth rate. Some of you are worried. Like I said, Hindu growth rate, again, I'll repeat it. Generally, when you achieve a growth rate of around 3.5%, as per the Hinduism, as per philosophy, it was assumed that it was possible because we are content with whatever growth we are achieving. That is the precise reason, right? That is the precise reason I said that this particular 3.5% growth rate is associated with the Hindu growth rate. Okay. In the 7th plan, extra point that you have said, that is 6% GDP and growth in agriculture sector and others were written in very short form. It is there, my dear, right? It is there. Please have a look at it. You will get the annotated PPTs. Use it. So the 8th 5-year plan. Coming to the point here, 8th 5-year plan. It was the first 5-year plan. It was which was basically promoting universal elementary education. Universal elementary education. That is the point related to 8th 5-year plan. They can ask it. Please remember it. Okay. Now, apart from this, the 9th 5-year plan, again the promotion of investment from the private sector, right? It was more than 50% in the 7th 5-year plan itself. In 8th 5-year plan, it went beyond 55%. And here also, right, lot of private sector investment, not just from the domestic market, but also from the foreign market. Foreign investment, right, came into India, as a result of which the private sector investment was again more than 50%. The plan also basically proposed the idea of the fiscal consolidation. That is the idea for FRBM. Although it was implemented later, the discussion regarding fiscal consolidation actually started well within the 9th 5-year plan itself. And we were able to achieve a higher growth rate and stable prices, that is stable inflation rate in the 9th 5-year plan. Okay. Next one, 10th 5-year plan. Any doubts so far? Sir, you have not written LERMS in 92-93. You write it. You write it, right? You know that, right? I'm happy that you know LERMS. So write it, doesn't matter. The exchange rate concept, if it is mentioned in that, that's more than sufficient. Okay. So any issues so far? Any issues? Can I go forward? Last 3 5-year plans. Not very consequential, but right, just for sake of information. Right? Last 3 5-year plans. Let's start now. 10th 5-year plan. Right? What is the importance of 10th 5-year plan? 1. 8% GDP growth rate every year. That was right, one of the very important, let's say, the targets, and we were able to achieve that. This was a time period. Please understand this. Especially after 2000, you will see that successively, year after year, we were able to clock in 7%, 7.6%, 8% GDP growth rates. And that is the reason whenever you talk about, let's say, golden years of growth rates, GDP growth rates in India, generally you will come across that time period after 2001 like this. For many, many years, we were able to achieve very good growth rates, more than 7%, more than 8% like this. Anyways, 10th 5-year plan, 2002 to 2007, we were able to implement, right, basically the various reforms. For example, we were able to implement FRBM, Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act. We were able to implement it. Apart from this, various other reforms, right, which were proposed by the government to promote transparency, to promote employment generation, etc. These were implemented. Apart from this, we were able to basically reduce the poverty. Just a second here. Okay. Right. Reduce the poverty by 5 percentage points by 2007. Right. Third, gainful and high quality employment, at least to the addition of labor force. What do you mean by this? From one year to next year, more and more population will join the labor force. Any disagreement? Please do let me know. From one year to the next year, from whatever number of people who are searching for the jobs, more people will get added to the market. So Government of India basically said, we want to provide quality jobs, quality employment to all of these particular population. Now, there is a very interesting question, how to remember all of these points. I'll tell you a trick. Remember this, the 10th 5-year plan. The 10th 5-year plan proposed a concept called as 11 monitorable targets. Now I hope you understand this. I would have written it at the last because you are asking a question now. 11 monitorable targets. The 10th 5-year plan proposed a concept called as 11 monitorable targets. Now, what do you mean by 11 monitorable targets? I've given some of them. Have a look at it. Right? I want the literacy to be this much. I want the jobs to be generated this much. I want poverty reduction by this much. And why are we calling this as a monitorable target? Simple. Remember the speciality about the 10th 5-year plan. For every state, the targets were given. For every state, the targets were given by the government. Is it okay? For every state, the targets were given by the government in the 10th 5-year plan. And because these targets were given, split to every state like this, these are referred to as 11 monitorable targets. Okay, right? So some of the targets I've given here, please have a look at it. Apart from this, same thing, FRBM was implemented. Private sector investment was higher in the market. You are able to attract a lot of foreign investment also at this particular point of time. Right? So these are certain important points regarding 10th 5-year plan. Can I go to the next one? Can I go to the next one? After this, we'll take a break. We'll finish off all the 12, then we'll take a break. Now, 11th 5-year plan, what is the speciality? Now it is much easier, right? Because you don't have to buy at everything. Because 11th, to a certain extent, we implemented 11th. 12th, we did not implement it completely. So you don't have to remember anything from the 12th. But from 11th and 12th, there is one term that you need to focus and remember, the concept of inclusive growth. Is it okay? The concept of inclusive growth. You will have to remember the concept. There is no option available to you. You will have to remember this. Why? For the first time, the government of India, through the concept of planning, came out with the idea of an inclusive growth. And they said, we want to achieve inclusive growth. Now, you will ask me, sir, what do you mean by inclusive growth? Let me define the term inclusive growth here. Inclusive growth refers to the pace and pattern of growth. Inclusive growth refers to the pace and pattern of growth. Right, now you will ask me again, sir, what is pace here? What is pattern here? Simple. Let me ask you a very simple question. Let's say tomorrow in the newspaper you will come across an article, Indian economy reaches $5 trillion. Should you be very happy and content with $5 trillion? Let me ask you this question. You'll simply come across the article, Indian economy reaches, that is a GDP, is equal to $5 trillion. Sufficient? Right? Simple question, sir. If you say yes, this data tell me, will this $5 trillion data tell you how many people are poor in India? I hope you understand this. Right? Will this particular data tell you how many people are poor in India? Will the data tell you how many people are not getting access to food? Will the data tell you how many children are dying because they are not getting access to healthcare? I hope you understand now. Right? So argument is, one is pace of the growth. One is a pace of a growth. We are able to achieve very good growth, but has every section of the society, every participant in the economy, have they got the benefit of the growth or not? Is it okay? Did they benefit from this kind of a growth? So that's the reason, again, I'll repeat the definition here. Inclusive growth, what does it mean? Inclusive growth simply means to pace as well as a pattern of growth. It is not just important to achieve high GDP growth rates, it is equally important to ensure that, right? It is equally important to ensure that the pattern, that is every part of the country, everybody in the country should be getting the benefit of it. Right? That is basically the idea of inclusive growth. Right? So remember this. Remember, the idea of inclusive growth was introduced in the 11th 5-year plan. Under this, we provided a comprehensive strategy for promotion of inclusive development, How do you say that we promoted inclusive development? For example, we basically introduced the concept of right to education, providing skill sets to people. In fact, some of you are asking northeastern states. Remember the concept of northeastern states from 11th 5-year plan. I hope you understand. I've told you earlier also, just to be very clear, let me simply remove it, because later you will get a doubt and ask me, sir, you have written northeastern states in 6th 5-year plan as well as in the 11th 5-year plan. Where should I actually remember it? My recommendation is, please do not remember northeastern from the 6th 5-year plan. Rather, remember it from the 11th 5-year plan. Why? Government of India, you will see that started allocating funds. Ministry for the Development of Northeastern region, all of this will start happening from this 11th 5-year plan. That is the reason, remember the concept of northeastern states being developed from 11th 5-year plan, not from earlier 5-year plans, because this is the most important plan. Okay, so northeastern states, and now government said we should bring them into the fold of the overall Indian economy. We should allocate funds, we should promote a development, we should set up a ministry for that, etc., etc. So 11th 5-year plan, one, inclusive growth, women empowerment, promotion of job generation, skilling, bringing in northeastern states into the fold of the growth in the Indian economy, etc., etc. So these are certain very important points regarding 11th 5-year plan. Apart from this, as usual, provide drinking water, clean drinking water by 2009, reduce inequality, gender inequality, how many of you know there is a gender inequality in India? What is this idea of a gender inequality? I'll give you a very simple data. As per various surveys, very small part of the total income that is earned in India is earned by women employees. Is it okay? Very small part, very small part, generally around 1/5 of it. Very small part of the income that is earned goes to the women employees in India. Most of the income that is generated in case of India goes to the male employees itself. That is gender income inequality. So gender inequality, income inequality is present. You'll have to reduce those inequalities. So these are certain very important points in the 11th 5-year plan. Any difficulty? Sir, there are so many points. How do I remember all of this? My recommendation is, try to make a mind map. 11th 5-year plan, 4 points. 12th 5-year plan, let's say 1 or 2 points. The 7th 5-year plan, 3 or 4 points, and try to revise it. Try to revise it, 3 times, 4 times like this. Yes, it is difficult. I'm not saying it is easy. I'm not saying it is easy. But at least, let's say after 3rd revision or the 4th revision, you'll be able to remember them and try to make tricks. For example, if somebody will ask me, sir, which 5-year plan will you say was very important in promotion of, let's say, population control measures in India? Have I not given a trick to you? That is a trick that I have made for myself. Generally, you will not find those kind of things in the book, but you need to connect the dots, make it easier. Sir, in which 5-year plan did we basically, let's say, promote northeastern states development? I've told you, inclusive growth, focus on inclusive growth. Where is the inclusive growth being promoted? 11th 5-year plan. So this is how you generally try to remember in which 5-year plan, what is important, etc., like this. Okay, finally, 12th 5-year plan. Should you discuss anything about 12th 5-year plan? Not required. Why? The government, there was a change in the government in 2014, and the new government discontinued 12th 5-year plan. They did not implement it completely. And even the planning commission was disbanded. If you do not have a planning commission which is responsible for the implementation of the plan, you tell me, how can you implement the plan? I hope you understand this. If there is a authority which is responsible for the implementation of the plan, that itself has been disbanded, how do you implement the plan? So anyways, the central theme of the 12th 5-year plan was a faster, sustainable, and more inclusive growth. And again, under this, we had 25 monitorable targets. Is it required to be remembered? Absolutely no. Don't waste your time. So government of India wanted to achieve certain target GDP growth rate and wanted to achieve 25 along with GDP, 25 targets. But somewhere midway, there was a change in the government and the planning commission was disbanded, and as a result of this, even the 12th 5-year plan was not implemented completely. Done? Okay, so this is the discussion regarding all the 12 5-year plans. Now, if you have any kind of questions, we'll take a break now. Don't worry, we'll take a break. If you have any kind of questions regarding any part of 12 5-year plans, you can raise the doubt. Will we get questions on planning in mains or prelims? In prelims, in the last 5 years, 2 questions have come. In mains, 1 question has come. I'll show that. I'll show you those questions, don't worry. Sir, in 2007 and 8, global financial crisis was there. So how did we still manage to get good growth rate in the 10th and 11th 5-year plan? Please understand this. Yes, there was a issue in the global market. There was a global financial crisis. But if you have read about the evaluation of this global financial crisis, one country that was less affected, underline that term here, one country that was less affected, I'm not saying India was not affected, one country that was less affected by this global financial crisis was Indian economy. Right? Even now, COVID pandemic, did it affect the global market? Of course, yes. But is it fair if I say, is it okay if I say, compared to other countries, India was less affected by COVID? Right? So again, sir, what is the reason? Thanks to Reserve Bank of India. And again, should you read all the policies that they implemented then? Not required. For example, after 2010, we had a different RBI governor, right? We had Mr. Raghuram Rajan. Mr. Raghuram Rajan was concerned about Fed tapering. 2013 Fed tapering started, right? The Fed tapering is not new concept, right? Some of you, when you came across the Fed tapering, you are basically right, assuming that Fed tapering is a very, very new concept. Absolutely no. Back in the year 2012, 2013 itself, there was this idea of a Fed tapering. And why 2008? Epicenter of the crisis was USA. Right? I hope you understand. Epicenter of the crisis was USA. And if there is a crisis in the US economy, what do you think the central bank, Federal Reserve of USA will do? They reduce the interest rates. But by 2013, there was right growth that was taking place in the USA economy. So they reversed. They went for Fed tapering. And we had Mr. Raghuram Rajan at that point of time, who implemented, again, when I say who implemented, don't give credit to only one person, Government of India as well as RBI, who implemented a lot of reforms in order to address the volatility that Fed tapering would have an impact on the Indian economy. Right? You will come across concept of FCNR-A, FCNR-B, etc. Those kinds of concepts were introduced in 2013-2014. Done? Again, all these are not required for GS paper. Right? Some of you would have not understood whatever I've told in the last 5 minutes. Should you panic? Should you have a heart attack? Should you go to a doctor? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. Right? Why? That is a 10-year-old data. That's something that has happened 10 years ago. Is it relevant for UPSC exam 23 and 24? Absolutely no. Okay, only if you're writing optional papers, then you will have to know the evolution of all of these events in India. Okay, any other doubts? Any other doubts? Any other doubts that you people have regarding the concept of 12 5-year plans? We have covered all the 12 5-year plans. And congratulations, by the way. Right, you have crossed one of the most irritating part of economic studies for you. All the 12 5-year plans. Individually, you will have to focus. That is the most irritating part. I do agree. I do agree. Most of you, right, when you say, right, sir, it is this, so much fact, I do agree. But what to do? Right, the problem is, if I cover it individually like this, right, you will have to remember so many facts. If I don't cover, suddenly a UPSC question will appear on, let's say, 5th 5-year plan. Your first reaction will be, faculty was useless. Faculty was, right, useless. Right? Waste of time. I spent so many hours reading economics. I sat on Sunday to read economics, etc. Okay, done. Any other issues that you are facing now? If capital output ratio is reduced, if not capital infuse and same output, if you want to have the same capital output ratio and if you infuse more capital output ratio will not remain same. I hope you understand. And at least I believe that is what you are asking. You want to have the same capital output ratio, that is you want to have, let's say, same output. If you increase the capital output ratio will not remain same. It is capital deepening. There's a term called as capital deepening. Right? Yeah, I hope you can understand the term by looking at it. Capital deepening. Opposite to capital deepening is capital efficiency. Any difficulty in understanding both of these terms? Capital efficiency and capital deepening. Capital efficiency means, let's say capital output ratio for 1 unit 6 rupees, 1 unit 4 rupee, capital efficiency. Right? On the other hand, if 1 unit 10 rupee and 1 unit becomes 15 rupees after 2 years, capital deepening. You should focus on capital efficiency, not capital deepening. Okay, done. Any other doubts? Sir, what kind of procurement comes under MSME? There is a whole list. Don't worry, there is a whole list. Right? You can go to the MoMSME website and you will get the list. But don't worry. I'll give a very simple example. Sir, why will they procure? Right? You said department, you said ministry. Why will they procure? For example, imagine the ministry wants to open up, right, a school. Would you want to purchase certain goods? Would you require certain benches? Would you require boards? Would you require coolers, that is water coolers, etc., etc.? So there is a lot of requirement that each of the ministry or a department or a public sector undertaking will have on annual basis. So at least 25% of that requirement, they will have to do it from MSCs. Okay, shall we take a break now? Any difficulty so far? Can we take a break now? Done. Okay, so it's 11:57. Let's start at 12:05. Let's begin again at 12:05. Let's continue with the evaluation. Right, planning is done now. Don't worry. Right, that is 12:05 5-year plans is done. Now only evaluation and Niti Aayog. Okay, then let's meet again at 12:05. Okay, welcome back. Am I audible? Let's start then. Am I audible? Okay, let's start. So what is the evaluation? What is the evaluation of the planning? We have implemented planning for more than, let's say, 70 years. So I'm sorry, more than 60 years. So what is the evaluation of the planning? Let's understand this. I'll divide the evaluation into two parts. That is, one, achievements, where we were able to achieve something because of planning. And second, certain shortfalls or let's say drawbacks of planning in India. One, we were able to achieve higher GDP growth rate. Any problem? Please do let me know. The GDP growth rate actually increased. Right? For example, if you remember some time ago, I told you after 1950 we have implemented planning, right? So 1950, post 1950 planning phase was implemented. So for the first 3 decades after the implementation of planning, the average growth rate in case of India, I hope you remember, was around 3.4%. But if you look at the planning growth rate or growth rate of Indian economy after the LPG reforms, especially, the growth rate, it has actually increased. Which means what? We are able to increase overall GDP as well as overall GDP growth rate as well. So generally after 1991, that is 8th 5-year plan. That should be very clear to you. 8th 5-year plan. So after 1991, 8th 5-year plan, after that you generally see a growth rate of more than 6%. Let me show it to you. Right? Let me basically show it to you. Have a look at this. Right? Generally, not always, generally you will see a growth rate of more than 6%. So before before 1990, the average growth rate in the Indian economy was very moderate, somewhere around 3.5%. But after the LPG reforms, right, especially after the LPG reforms, the growth rate of Indian economy has taken off. That is one very important point or the achievement that you need to remember. Right, so one, GDP growth rate or GDP value also has increased. And some of you might be thinking, sir, right, anything else can you add to this? Of course, yes. I just think of this and answer whether I'm correct or not. Whenever the GDP increases, the per capita incomes generally increase, and this is associated with better standard of living. This is associated with improved standard of living. Done? Right, so this is the first achievement. Second one, industries, the growth rate in the industries has actually improved. Right, post independence, over a period of time, we have implemented multiple 5-year plans. We also have implemented industrial plans or industrial policies, 48, 56, 73, 80, 91, etc. So various industrial policies along with the planning in case of India has improved the growth rate even in the industries. If you see the industrial base today, industrial base means how many goods we are able to produce, how many kinds of goods we are producing in India, etc. Industrial base in India today, it is much better compared to what it was in 1950s. So industrial growth rate also is a positive here. The percentage of BPL population has reduced. Now let me basically give you an idea here. BPL stands for below poverty line. Below poverty line. Now what is this idea of a below poverty line? Simply how much population is poor in India. Simple. How many of the total people in India are poor? That is called as a below poverty line. Right, so understand this. The percentage of BPL, that is the percentage of population which could be classified as poor, has reduced. For example, in 1990s itself, around 45% of total population was classified as poor. Around 45%. And if you look at the latest data published by the government, I'll take the data of Suresh Tendulkar committee, not Sachin Tendulkar, Suresh Tendulkar committee. Right, the Tendulkar committee basically recommended that 21.9% of total population, right, 21.9% of total population can be considered as poor. Right, but please understand, this is very old data. I hope you understand this. Those for whom the social issue classes are over, you would have come across this. the Tendulkar committee recommendations are applicable for 11 and 12. We are in 2023. Now, those who are wondering, sir, why are you taking such a old data? The logic is that generally you require population census. Is it okay? Right? You require population census. You tell me post 2011, do we have any population census for which the data is available? Answer is no. We are supposed to conduct a population census now, but because of the pandemic, etc., it has been put on hold. But either ways, after 2011, we do not have a population census. And that is a precise reason, even when you read government data or when you read, let's say, many of the books, they would have given you Tendulkar committee report as per 2011 population. So the BPL population, that is percentage of poor people in India, has actually come down over a period of time. The overall food production has increased, right? We were talking about food scarcity in India. At 1950, when we started, I hope you remember that, we were talking about food imports into India, right? Scarcity of food grain production or scarcity of food grains in India. Today, do we suffer from food scarcity? No, we have huge amount of surplus of food. Is it okay? We have huge amount of surplus production. So because of many of the reforms that have been undertaken by the government in the last 50 plus years, from the shortage situation, now we have surplus situation. Is the logic okay? From the shortage situation, we have shifted to a surplus situation, right? So these are some of the achievements of the planning in India. Having said so, are there any concerns? Are there any problems with what we have followed so far? First one, there was no mechanism for regular engagement between center and state. That is, if you remember yesterday, I gave you the structure of planning commission. I gave you the structure of ANDC. I told you in the planning commission, there was no representation of the states. So at a place where, or at a point where we are making a 5-year plan, there is no state representation. The state will only come into picture when the plans are made, plans are sent to National Development Council. So there was no structural mechanism for regular engagement between the state and center in the place, or let's say at the point of preparing the 5-year plans. Second, there was a failure to implement land reforms. There are multiple land reforms which are implemented at this point of time. Now some of you will jump and say, sir, you have not discussed land reforms. The land reforms will be covered when the faculty will discuss post-independence India. Right? Post-independence India. Right? Multiple types of land reforms were implemented. For example, you will come across abolition of zamindari system, land ceiling measures, tenancy reforms, etc. But the fact is very simple. Most of these reforms have failed to have a huge impact at the ground level. Now you will ask me, sir, why? Reason is simple. These reforms were generally announced by the central government, but it was supposed to be implemented by the respective state governments. I hope you understand this. The land reforms, right, are supposed to be implemented by the respective state governments, and many of the state governments have not implemented this appropriately, and as a result of this, expected results are not there. Right? So failure to implement the land reforms efficiently. We followed a concept called as one size fits all approach. That is, in simple terms, the plan was prepared for full India. The 5-year plan was made for the whole of India. But don't you think the requirement will change from one state to another state? I'll repeat it. The plan was prepared for the whole of India, but the requirement will change from one state to another state. What is required in one state may or may not be required in another state. For example, a state which is industrially very well grown, that is, has lot of industries, such a state doesn't require an industrial policy to be implemented all over again, because the industries are very well developed. What about other states? Right, sir? Right. So the argument was, rather than having only one plan for whole of India, what we should have done is, right, taken the states on the level where the plan is prepared and ensure that individual states' interest is also protected in the plans. But that was not there. Higher population growth rate, right? So population control measures were implemented. I hope you remember the 5-year plan where we started targeting the population control measures or family planning. That was the 4th 5-year plan. 4th 5-year plan, 69 to 74, and I've given the trick also, 1971. That's a key term for you. So we have implemented multiple family planning measures post the 3rd 5-year plan. But even then, we have not been able to control population in India. We have experienced a population explosion. Meaning what? The growth rate of population is very, very high in India. And that is a precise reason, I'm pretty sure all of you have come across these articles. India is going to be the largest populated country in the world. Largest populated country in the world now. At least in one way, we are going to overtake China. Right? So the argument is population growth is very high. We have not been able to control it despite having measures. And what is the concern here? If the population grows, what is the problem? Simple. The pressure on the infrastructure will automatically increase. Right? Can I give you an example? How many of you seen how many people travel by the local trains in Mumbai? Just imagine that. How many people are traveling in the local trains in Mumbai? Do you think we have sufficient infrastructure to handle the population which is present in Mumbai? Infrastructure in the sense of hospitals, housing, right? Road network, railway network, water supply, electricity supply, etc., etc., etc. Right? How many of you think that we have sufficient infrastructure in all the cities to handle the population in the city? Of course no. And the answer is a straightforward no. You should not have any kind of a doubt. Do not have any kind of a doubt. Don't say, sir, it might be there. You take any big city for that matter. Mumbai. Do we have sufficient infrastructure there in Mumbai? Absolutely no. Right? Take one more bigger city. Let's say Kolkata. Right? Take one more big city. Delhi. Do you think we have sufficient infrastructure? Absolutely no. So the pressure on the infrastructure will be very, very high and will not be able to meet this kind of a demand requirement. Right? So population growth rate is very high and that has led to a lot of stress on the infrastructure. GDP contribution is uneven. What do you mean by the term skewed here? Right? Not uniform. Skewed means not uniform, or else you can also say it is uneven. Right? What do you mean by that? If you take the GDP numbers and find out which states are contributing how much, you will find a pattern. What is the pattern? Some of the states, that is southern states, Gujarat, Maharashtra, the contribution to GDP will be very, very high. Contribution to GDP will be very, very high. But if you take, let's say, population, right, split the states based on the population, you will realize that some of the northern states which have very, very high population do not contribute in the same proportion to the GDP. So the argument is the contribution from all the states, right? Basically, there is a skewness. There is an uneven contribution that is coming from all these states. The state with huge amount of labor, huge amount of human labor availability doesn't contribute very large to the GDP. But on the other hand, some of the states which have, let's say, lesser population are contributing much higher. Right, so GDP contribution is uneven. Either you can talk in terms of, let's say, context of the states or context of, let's say, the sectors also. Agriculture sector accounts for 49% of the working population. Contributes how much? Around 16%. Right, so uneven contribution. And next one, employment growth rate is very low. Unemployment rate is higher in case of India. The population which is searching for jobs is very, very high. New stable job creation is not at the same pace. Right? The jobs which are getting generated, the growth rate in the jobs is not moving at the same pace compared to number of people who are searching for the jobs. Right? So these are some of the features, right, based on which you can simply say the planning has failed on these areas. Can I go forward? Any doubts in any one of them? Let me know. Any doubts in any one of them? So what is the verdict? Right? How should you basically conclude then? We have achieved progress in various sectors. but there is a lack of progress or underachievement in some of the areas. For example, land reforms, we have not been able to achieve progress there. Population control, employment growth rate, social infrastructure, etc. So it's a basically mixed bag. Do not come to a conclusion planning was a failure. Do not conclude that planning was a very big, grand success also. Right? In some areas, yes, we have achieved very good, satisfactory outcomes. And these are the areas where we have not been able to achieve satisfactory outcomes. So what are the reasons? Why are we lagging behind in some of the areas? One, investment has taken an impact, especially in the last 1.5 decade. Especially in the last 1.5 decade, the investment in the economy has been affected. It started with the global financial crisis. Now we were again recovering, and then there was a pandemic effect. Now again we are recovering. Right? So investments right, have been affected very recently. Low availability of a skilled labor. We'll discuss more about this next week. That is Saturday. I'll discuss a chapter that is employment. We'll have a detailed discussion about employment, and I'll tell you what has happened to the skilled labor in India. What is government of India trying to do, right, in order to promote availability of skilled labor? What are the problems, etc., etc. We'll understand it later. Lack of specialized investment institutions, that is long-term lenders, specifically for, let's say, infrastructure, etc. They are lagging behind in India. So these are some of the reasons which is holding back the growth in the Indian economy in recent times. Done? So this is the total discussion about 12 5-year plans, the evaluation, the Planning Commission and National Development Council. Anybody has any kind of a doubt in any of the area, please do let me know. Otherwise, I'll go to the next one. We have to discuss about Niti Aayog. The next concept is Niti Aayog. Any doubts? Lunch break. Just now you have come from a break. Again, you are worried about lunch break. We'll take the lunch break at around 1 o'clock. Don't worry. I will give you lunch break. Right? Not being concerned about you, just a joke by the way, but I'm concerned about myself. That is just like you people, I also feel hungry. So I will also take lunch break. Don't worry. We'll take the lunch break at around 1 o'clock. Okay. Any other doubts apart from lunch break? Any other doubts? Okay. Done then. Let me go ahead. Niti Aayog. Next concept I'll be discussing is Niti Aayog. Now, first and foremost, what is Niti? Niti stands for National Institution for Transforming India. Simple. Niti stands for National Institution for Transforming India. Right? Niti Aayog was established by the government at post 2014 in India. And the government of India said, unlike Planning Commission, will not have the same structure as Planning Commission, because in Planning Commission there was no role of the states. In the Planning Commission, only central government had the role, experts were there was no role of the states. So we will not be having the model of Planning Commission here. What we will do is we'll disband the Planning Commission completely. We'll set up a new authority by the name of Niti Aayog. And the speciality about Niti Aayog is that the Niti Aayog will not be dealing anything related to finances. Right? For example, have a look at this. For example, in case of the 5-year plans, if you remember earlier, I told you a concept of Gadgil formula. Right? I hope you remember that. I told you about Gadgil formula. Right? The idea of the allocation of funds, it was discussed in the third 5-year plan. So under the Gadgil formula, what was the basic idea? Right? How the funds would be allocated to each of the states. For the implementation of the plans, how the funds would be allocated. Later, in fact, I just want to add one more point here. Later, the Gadgil formula was again restructured. Right? I hope you understand. Even the Gadgil formula was rewritten like this. There was a committee which was headed by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee. I'm pretty sure all of you know about Pranab Mukherjee, right? The former president of India and a former finance minister as well. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, when he was a part of the Planning Commission in 1990s, right, we set up a Mukherjee committee, and based on the recommendation of the Mukherjee committee, again we restructured, right? We basically revamped the Gadgil formula, and that is the reason that formula thereafter was referred to as Gadgil-Mukherjee formula. Initially Gadgil formula, but because we set up, right, right, two of you are saying I'm not audible. Am I audible or not? Two of you are saying I'm not audible. Am I audible or not? And the beautiful part was the same person who said, sir, you are not audible, now says you are audible. Okay. The same person who commented, hey, please check you are not audible. I asked, am I audible? And the same person says, yes, sir, you are audible. Right. Let's continue then. Let's continue. So the point that I was mentioning was, initially it was Gadgil formula. Then in 1990s, we set up a committee which was headed by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, and we restructured, we revamped Gadgil formula. And thereafter, it was referred to as Gadgil-Mukherjee formula. Don't be confused. These are certain points. Please remember it. Okay, so come back to this. The earlier planning commission had the powers. They had the powers to allocate funds. They had the powers to allocate funds to the states. Now, Government of India says Niti Aayog will never be given any power to allocate funds. It will not have anything to do with financial powers. It is simply an advisory committee. In simple terms, it is an authority which will give advice to Government of India. Right? So, Niti Aayog, what is the composition? The most important part of Niti Aayog is this. We have one full-time organization, that is the part of Niti Aayog which will continue to work on day-to-day basis. The full-time organization will be headed by the chairperson, who is the Prime Minister. Apart from Prime Minister, we also have a vice chairperson. We have a CEO of Niti Aayog. We have representation of various experts appointed again by the government, etc. So one part of Niti Aayog is the full-time organization where it is headed by the Prime Minister, chairperson. And again, please understand, sir, is it just that the full-time organization, the head of it is the Prime Minister? Obviously, no. If you talk about Niti Aayog, any part of Niti Aayog, they will have to report to the chairperson. Who is the chairperson of Niti Aayog? It is the Prime Minister. Okay, so one part of it, it is the full-time organization. But apart from full-time organization, we also have one more part or one more component within Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog, it is referred to as Governing Council. And please check the newspapers. Last couple of months ago, there was a meet of governing councils under the Niti Aayog. I hope you understand why these terms are important for UPSC. Right? Very, very recently, there was a meet of governing council under the Niti Aayog. What is the specialty about governing council? Please understand, the governing council has a representation of all the states. Is it okay? The governing council of Niti Aayog has a representation of all the states as well as the heads of union territories. And who is going to head, who is going to chair this governing council? Again, it's the same person, Prime Minister. Right? So one part is a full-time organization, second one is governing council. And what is the role of all of this? Simple. Keep on, right, giving inputs to Government of India. Keep on giving advice to Government of India. Now, what are the objectives of Niti Aayog? Let's go one by one. Don't have a heart attack looking at the slide. I'll simplify it. We'll go one after the one. Follow this carefully. First one, Government of India will allocate a certain, right, subject to Niti Aayog, will allocate a work to Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog should study about this and report back to Government of India. Give recommendations to Government of India. And please understand, Niti Aayog is not a constitutional body. Yesterday also I mentioned it. Today I am repeating it. Niti Aayog is not a constitutional body. Right? So whatever recommendations are given, these are simply recommendations. Advisories in nature. That's it. Right? They are not binding on the Government of India. The government will decide whether they should implement them or not. So point number one, the Government of India will allocate a certain area for study purposes, right, for looking at it to the Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog will study and return with a recommendation to Government of India. Sir, any example? I'll give you one example. Earlier, if you remember, under National Food Security Act, NFSA, under National Food Security Act, what is the coverage? Coverage is 67%. Coverage is 67% of total population. Total population of which year? 67% of 2011 population. And did I not tell you, because you are covering 2011 population, there will be certain exclusion errors. I hope you understand my statement. Because you are targeting 2011 population, that is, let's say 121 crore people, and today we have, let's say, more than 130 crore people, don't you think there will be certain exclusion error there? Right? Supreme Court of India has looked at it. Supreme Court of India has asked Government of India, can you do something about it? Government of India has asked Niti Aayog to give a recommendation on it. Government of India has given this to Niti Aayog and has asked, can you give me a recommendation regarding the coverage of the population under NFSA? Right? So first one, allocate certain subject to Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog will give recommendation. Second point, even without Government of India allocating it, Niti Aayog can take up any other area which is important security wise, which is important in terms of protecting national interest, etc., and provide recommendation to the government. Right? To evolve a shared vision of national development priorities, sectors and strategies with active involvement of the states. Third one, to make certain plans and first try the plans for implementation at lowest level. That is, let's say, make a scheme, make a plan, right? First implement it at a village level, then extrapolate, right? Study what has happened at the village level, then implement it at a district level, then implement it at a state level, then implement it all of India, right? Pan-India implementation. Basically, bottom to the top. Is it okay? Bottom to the top. Start from the bottom level and keep on implementing at a higher level like this. To develop mechanisms, to formulate plans to implement at the lowest level, then basically or gradually aggregate these at higher levels of government. Next one, right? There are certain subjects which are referred to it, study and give recommendation. Where there are certain sections of the society who are not able to leverage, who are not able to get the benefit of growth in the economy. That is, India's GDP is increasing, per capita incomes are increasing, but even after that, certain population is there who is not getting benefit. Who is not getting benefit means what? Population which is remaining very poor continuously. Right? Government is implementing policies, they are not able to move out of poverty. So certain sections of the society which are excluded from getting the benefit of the growth that is happening in the economy, Niti Aayog will try to focus on them, will try to focus and give suggestions to the Government of India. To design a strategic and long-term policy and program frameworks and initiatives and monitor their progress and their efficacy. That is simple. Within Niti Aayog, there is one office. Simple. Within Niti Aayog, there is an office. Development Monitoring Office. What this office does is, Government of India has implemented lot of policies. Whether these policies are getting implemented effectively or not. Is it okay? Whether these policies are getting implemented effectively or not. Study and give suggestion to the government. To foster cooperative federalism through structured support initiatives and mechanism with the states. Meaning what? Right, I'll start with the technical term here. Cooperative federalism. What do you mean by cooperative federalism? There is, right, through different mechanisms, through different policies, the cooperation between the center and the state will increase. Simple. The cooperation between center and the state will increase. And what is the use of this cooperation? If the cooperation between the center as well as the states increases, don't you think certain policies can be implemented much more effectively? I'll give you examples. If the cooperation between center and states, right, increases, many policies which are pan-India in nature, many reforms which are supposed to be implemented throughout India, they can be implemented much effectively now. Again, not related to Niti Aayog, but let me give you a similar example. GST, Goods and Services Tax. Can I say that GST Council is an example of cooperative federalism? Is it okay? I'll repeat it. Right? The GST Council is an example of cooperative federalism. Yes or no? Please do let me know. Right? Why? Both, that is the center as well as states, have come together and they're implementing a policy. So argument again here is very simple. To foster this kind of a coordination between center and states so that we'll be able to implement many more policies. Right? So these are some of the objectives of Niti Aayog. Now, how Niti Aayog is different compared to Planning Commission? Right? We have one authority now. How it is different compared to the earlier authority? First and foremost, Planning Commission was a central government institution and had no representation of the states. Every authority or every personnel who was appointed in the Planning Commission was appointed by the central government and there was no representation of the states. But in Niti Aayog, just now we have gone through the concept of Governing Council. Governing Council is a component, part of Niti Aayog. And Governing Council consists of chief ministers of all the states and the heads of union territories. So don't you think the first very important difference is in PC, there was no representation of the states. In the Niti, there is a representation of the states. Second one, in case of Planning Commission, PC, and when I say PC, economics, don't go to Priyanka Chopra, right? Focus on economics. In PC, right, the following model, that is a top to bottom model of planning, was followed. That is, Planning Commission would form the 5-year plan, give it to the states, states would implement it, top to bottom. Whereas now we are saying, no, let's not do that. You want to make a plan, start it from the village level. And even before making a plan, Governing Council is there. Get the viewpoint of the states. Right? Views of the stakeholder is very important. So participation of the states is there in case of Niti Aayog. The Planning Commission was involved in setting growth targets. Planning Commission, right, used to make strategies and implement it through the state governments. The Niti Aayog is not going to be involved in any of this. Even if they form a strategy, they are not going to implement it. They are going to give it to Government of India. Government of India now will decide should we implement it or not. Right? The Planning Commission dealt with finances. Niti Aayog doesn't have any financial power. They don't allocate any money to any state government. Right? Doesn't handle with finances. So finally, Planning Commission was an advisory body with a financial power. Niti Aayog is simply an advisory body. Okay? Right? So this is the difference between the Planning Commission as well as Niti Aayog. Apart from this, right, sir, are these the only differences? No. Write the year of establishment. Write the year of establishment. Right? So there are so many other differences, but those are just merely factual information. Now, why Niti Aayog is so important? What is the importance of Niti Aayog? First one, Niti Aayog will basically coordinate between center and a state. That is, it will promote the cooperation between central government and state government, that is through cooperative federalism. Point number one. Second point, Niti Aayog will also promote competition between states. Remember this. Niti Aayog will promote healthy competition. That's also very important. Healthy competition between the states. Now, many of you will ask me, sir, how? How can Niti Aayog promote competition between the states? I'll give a very simple example. There is one index published by Niti Aayog, Export Preparedness Index. There is one index prepared by Niti Aayog, Export Preparedness Index, EPI. And under the Export Preparedness Index, Niti Aayog will provide ranking to all the states. There are various parameters on which the rankings are provided. Now, what is the use of it? Simple. Imagine you want to set up a manufacturing facility in India. You want to set up a manufacturing facility, and part of the production that you have done, you want to promote the export. You want to export it to, let's say, USA. Now, simple question to you, will you conduct your own survey, or you'll basically look at the index and realize that, okay, the top states are those which are good to invest in? I'll repeat it again. You want to invest, want to set up a manufacturing facility, and you want to export some of it. So will you keep on going from one state website to another state government website, trying to find out what facility they have, whether it is good or not, etc. Or you'll simply look at the ranking given by the Niti Aayog under the Export Preparedness Index and realize that, okay, Gujarat is a good state to invest, right? Karnataka is a good state to invest. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, these are good states because they have got good ranking. Right? Obviously, if you're a rational investor, you will go with the ranking. You'll go with the ranking. Analysis is already there. You will go with the ranking. Now tell me, don't you think in order to become the topmost ranked in this ranking or index, don't you think there'll be competition between the states? Is it okay? There's a competition between the states. One state government will announce a policy to set up export infrastructure. Another state government might simply promote a policy where land acquisition is made easier for promotion of exports, so that their performance will improve, their ranking will also improve. This is called as competitive federalism. This is referred to as competitive federalism. That is, there is a competition amongst units in the economy. That is, unit is the states here. The states are competing with each other, right? And as a result of this, there is an improvement in the economy. This is called as competitive federalism. So the Niti Aayog will not only provide for or will not only promote cooperative federalism, it will also promote a competitive federalism, right? So one, competitive, cooperative. Second, right, basically it will take the viewpoints of various agencies in the market. For example, you must have heard of CII, Confederation of Indian Industry. There are various agencies in the market like this. The Niti Aayog will hold consultations with all of them, and whatever, right, viewpoints or whatever recommendations, whatever changes they want, they will basically take those into consideration, give it as a recommendation to Government of India. In simple terms, can I put it in a different way, much better way? Niti Aayog will act as a link between agencies as well as government. Is it okay? The Niti Aayog will act as a link between the different agencies in the market and the government. Whatever these types of agencies want, what the Niti Aayog will do is they will take their inputs, prepare a report, give it to government like this. Right? Apart from this, it also has basically an office in place. I've told you this earlier. Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, DMEO. Whatever policies, long-term policies are implemented by Government of India, what is their effectiveness? Are they being implemented efficiently or not? It is this office which will keep a track of all of these policies. Okay, so these are some of the reasons why Niti Aayog is so important for Indian economy. Right? Any doubts so far? Can I go forward? Any doubts so far? Okay. So what has been the achievement of Niti Aayog? What has been the performance of Niti Aayog so far? I'll give you around 10 points. Try to by heart them. At least try to remember 5 to 6. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. It is never an exhaustive list, right? Again, Niti Aayog will keep on coming out with a lot of announcements, right? One after the other. So let's start now. 1. I'm pretty sure all of you heard of, right? Where is that? Bullet train project. Let me start with the second one directly. Right? All of you heard of bullet train project? Niti Aayog had set up a committee to study the feasibility of the project. Is it okay? Right? The bullet train project basically is being implemented between 2 industrial centers in India. That is Ahmedabad and Mumbai. So Niti Aayog had set up, right, one committee to study whether the project will be feasible, whether this is a correct project for this area corridor or not. And that was headed by Mr. Arvind Panageria. Mr. Arvind Panageria, right? So one committee which has given recommendation in favor of the bullet train project. Second one, there was one more committee which was set up by the Niti Aayog, which was headed by Mr. Bibek Debroy. And please remember this, Mr. Bibek Debroy is a very, very important economist. He's a very important economist. Very often, if you read Indian Express newspapers, Indian Express, he's a columnist in Indian Express newspapers. Bibek Debroy is a very relevant economist today. So if you come across any statement given by Mr. Ramesh Chand, Mr. Arvind Panageria, right, Mr. Bibek Debroy, etc., please look at it carefully. Look at it carefully. They would have discussed one or the other issue there. Okay, so there was one more committee which was set up by Niti Aayog, headed by Mr. Bibek Debroy, and this committee recommended regarding restructuring of Indian Railways. For example, merger of the railway budget with union budget. This was one of the right points which was mentioned in the Bibek Debroy committee, because the committee recommended that most of the announcements that we do in the railway budget are populist in nature. We are not worried about financial position of the railways. We are only worried about populism. That's a reason it's not a constitutional mandate. Simply merge it, right? And Government of India has actually done it. Third one, there was one more committee which was headed by Mr. Tajamul Haq, right? Important. Why? Mr. Tajamul Haq is associated with the land reforms in India, and he has passed away. Couple of years ago, Mr. Tajamul Haq passed away. So please be careful. Mr. Tajamul Haq is associated with land reforms. Niti Aayog set up a committee which was headed by Mr. Tajamul Haq, and this committee has recommended Land Leasing Act for the states. And many of the states have not implemented the Land Leasing Act. What is this idea for Land Leasing Act? Let me give a basic concept here. Understand this carefully. Imagine I own a piece of land in my village. Let's say 10 hectares. Now I'm busy here teaching for UPSC Civil Services examination, which means I'm not using the land for cultivation purposes. It's very simple. I am there here. Software engineer is sitting in office. Right? Let's say somebody has gone to a foreign country, but land is there. Agriculture land is there. Now we will simply lease the agriculture land. We will give it on lease it to somebody else. Right? A farmer to cultivate on. This is basically called as land leasing. But there is one problem with land leasing. What is the problem? Whenever such agreements are done, these are oral in nature. Any difficulty in understanding this? Whenever such agreements are done, whenever such land leases are provided like this, the agreements are oral in nature. Nothing is written in paper, everything is oral. Now tell me, if an agreement is oral in nature, can either of the parties, right, basically go back in the sense, at one point of time they would say X is the amount, at another point of time they'll simply say Y rupees is the amount. Possible? Of course, yes. Right? What if there's a dispute between both of the parties? How do you resolve when agreement is not there? That is the precise reason what this committee recommended was, we should have written agreements. We should not have oral agreements. We should have a standard written agreement where what is the land size is given. Who is the person giving it on lease? For what duration the lease is provided? For what consideration? That is how much money has to be paid in return, etc., etc., etc. All these details are there in the agreement. And if, right, let's say the owner of the land violates any of the provisions in the agreement, then how this has to be resolved? All these are recommended in the Land Leasing Act, which has been recommended by the Tajamul Haq committee, which is yet to be adopted by the states. And this committee was appointed by Niti Aayog. Next one, promote competitive federalism amongst state governments through, let's say, the concept of various indices. Right? There is Composite Water Management Index, Export Preparedness Index. Right? There are so many indices which are published by Niti Aayog, where Niti Aayog ranks all the states like this. Okay. Next one, It has been asked to recommend the population coverage under National Food Security Act, already mentioned. Interministerial committee has been actively monitoring setting up of 5 urea plants. Please be very, very careful with this. I'll connect it to current affairs. Let me see how many of you are reading current affairs. Right? I'll come to that. An interministerial committee has been actively monitoring setting up of 5 new urea plants at Ramagundam, Talcher, Gorakhpur, Sindri and Barauni. Right, so this was there in the newspaper as well. Now coming to the current affairs, let me know how many of you read yesterday's current affairs regarding the nano DOP. I'm sorry, DAP. Nano DAP. Let me check how many of you have read. Start answering. Don't worry about lunch break. We'll take lunch break. Please don't worry about lunch break. Focus here. How many of you read about nano DAP? Very, very important. Please read about it. Right? We have discussed DAP, diammonium phosphate. We have discussed about it. And while discussing the fertilizer, right, that is, sir, where you have discussed the subsidy chapter. While discussing that, I've told you the problem regarding the fertilizer in case of India. We require a lot of fertilizers, but the domestic production does not meet the required amount. So as a result of which we import a lot of these fertilizers. And one such fertilizer is diammonium phosphate itself. Right? Highest amount of subsidy goes to urea. Second highest generally goes to diammonium phosphate. Right? It goes to diammonium phosphate. And what has happened? Now Government of India has allowed IFCO, same company or same cooperative. IFCO, right? It is the same company, IFCO, that has been allowed to manufacture nano DAP and sell for the next 3 years in India. Right? A nano DAP now will be manufactured by IFCO. There is one more company, Coromandel. 2 companies are producing it in joint venture. That both of them are collectively producing it. Coromandel and IFCO. Now the Government of India says for the next 3 years, nano DAP will be produced by them and commercially sold to the farmers. Now some of that's where you need to keep on updating the current affairs. And I keep on telling you this. Why this is important? The nano DAP that is going to be produced by this company now will be much cheaper. One, it will be much cheaper compared to the traditional DAP. Import dependence will be very low now. And third, government subsidy will be very low. I hope you understand. Right? The import dependence will come down. Government subsidy payment will come down. And the government itself says this nano DAP, nano diammonium phosphate, the cost of it without any subsidy, it is already cheaper compared to traditional DAP. Right? So these are some of the very important points. Please read about it. Please read about it. Right? Suddenly UPSC can ask you this. And now you will keep on searching of these concepts in the book. It will not be there in the book. Do not waste your time. Okay, come to this next point here. A task force has been constituted under the chairmanship of Mr. Ramesh Chand, very, very important economist, right? Which will find a long-term solution for issue faced by the sugarcane industries. Niti Aayog also has constituted a committee under Mr. Justice A.K. Sikri to give recommendation regarding ODR in India. What is this ODR? ODR stands for Online Dispute Resolution. ODR stands for Online Dispute Resolution. Right? ODR, Online Dispute Resolution. Right? What is this idea for Online Dispute Resolution? Simple. Right? Many of the times, one of the concern regarding taking any cases to judiciary, taking any matters to judiciary has been that the time that the judiciary takes to resolve these cases is very, very high. Right? I hope remember the dialogue which was given by Sunny Deol in one of the movies. Tariq pe Tariq pe Tariq. Right? Same concept you can apply here. So whenever you have these commercial disputes, and if these commercial disputes, right, they want to resolve it through, let's say, judiciary, it's not done easily in India. The time taken is very, very long. And that's a problem. That's a problem because commercial disputes means money is getting stuck up in the judiciary, right? Because neither one party will pay, another party will receive because judiciary is yet to resolve the dispute. So how can we address it? One recommendation that has been provided by Justice A.K. Sikri committee is that we should adopt online dispute resolution. That is, right now, every time, right, the case has been taken up by the judiciary, the files are moved physically like this, right? Physical files are made. Documents are always submitted in physical form. The people are asked to be present physically in the court, etc. Rather than that, can we shift to a system wherein everything is done online? Files are created, documents are created online, digital copies will be supplied, and even if the appellants, or let's say the other parties are not present, no issues, they can join via, let's say, Zoom, so that the process of the online dispute resolution can be taken up and the disputes can be resolved much smoothly in a very faster manner. That is the recommendation of Justice A.K. Sikri Committee. We are yet to implement it. Okay, so these are some of the achievements of Niti Aayog. Any difficulty so far? We are at the last part of the planning concept. Last slide in the planning chapter. What is the criticism? What is the criticism against Niti Aayog then? Is there any problem with the functioning of Niti Aayog? Of course, yes. One of the objectives of Niti Aayog was to ensure that certain excluded population, that is, let's say, poor people, are not getting benefit. So we will formulate policy and we'll try to bring them into the growth. We'll try to ensure that they will also get the benefit of growth. Now, don't you think even having Niti Aayog, even after having Niti Aayog for more than 6 years now, the number of poor people, I'm not talking about percentage, the number of poor people in India are very high. Point number one. Second point, Niti Aayog, right? Understand this. Niti Aayog has recommended many policies. But please understand, there have been certain policies which are implemented by the government, which are pan-India in nature, but Niti Aayog has no role in that. Best example is Goods and Services Tax, GST. You tell me, what is the role of Niti Aayog in the GST? Absolutely no role. So argument is, we set up Niti Aayog to ensure that it will provide recommendations, advices to Government of India which are having a lot of national interest in the mind, etc., etc. But even then, what we are trying to say is, even if Niti Aayog was not there, there could have been certain other policies which are pan-India in nature, which government would have continued to implement. So the relevance of Niti Aayog is not applicable to all the major policies. It is restricted to some of the policies only. Next one, it is not a constitutional body. So how do you hold it accountable? Accountability in the sense, right, just like CBI, right? I hope you know what is the argument, criticism against CBI. Supreme Court of India said CBI is a caged parrot, right? Look at the statement. Nobody else. Supreme Court said CBI is like a caged parrot and it speaks in the master's voice. That is, as the government will change, the role of CBI, the work of CBI will change, right? Because understand this, CBI appointments are done by the Government of India. Now apply the same logic to Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is supposed to work as an independent authority. I understand this. It is supposed to work as an independent, that is, national interest should be paramount to it. National interest, not the interest of the government. But how do you ensure that independence will be there? Because it is not a constitutional body. Somebody is appointed through the executive authority, they can be removed through the executive authority. So that independence part is actually missing, accountability part is missing. Right? It doesn't influence any kind of investment because they do not have financial powers. Planning Commission had financial powers. They could invest, they could promote investments from the private sector. And finally, as already mentioned, we have set up Niti Aayog. It's been more than 6 years now, but even today we find gender inequality, income inequality, very high number of poor people in India, etc. Right? So these are some of the criticisms against Niti Aayog, National Institution for Transforming India. Done? That's it. right? So this is the complete discussion regarding, right? This is the complete discussion regarding the planning chapter. Any doubts that you people have, please raise it so that we can take up questions. What financial powers did PC have? My dear, Planning Commission was allowed to find out special category states. In fact, that was there in the newspapers. They were allowed to find special category states and a lot of financial assistance was provided. Gadgil formula, right? The funds would be distributed by the Planning Commission. A lot of financial powers were there for PC. Any doubts? Can we take up questions then? Can we take up questions? Once we'll finish the questions, then we can take the lunch break. Let's start. Let's start. Okay. Right. So despite being a high savings economy, capital formation may not result in significant increase in the output due to. Right. Basically what they're saying is, look at the application part here. G is equal to S upon R. All of you remember the formula. G is equal to S upon R. They're saying that the savings in the economy have increased, but the growth is not increasing significantly. There is no significant change in G. S has changed. G is not changing by a very large number. Why? Because there is one more factor that is affecting G here, that is capital output ratio. High capital output ratio, right? So the right option is option D, high COR. Any difficulty in understanding this? It's basically application of Harrod-Domer model formula. Application of Harrod-Domer model. G is equal to S upon R. The question says S is increasing, but G is not increasing significantly. Why? Because there is one more denominator here, inversely proportional, right? R is also increasing. Okay. Next, let me not launch a poll here. It's a direct question, right? Straightforward answer. Let's solve it here itself. The main objective of 12th 5-year plan. The main objective of 12th 5-year plan, right? What was the main objective? Inclusive growth and poverty reduction? No. Inclusive growth and sustainable growth? Again, no. Sustainable and inclusive growth to reduce unemployment? No. Faster, sustainable and more inclusive growth. Right option is option D here. Okay. Okay, we need to have a discussion regarding this. We'll take it after the lunch break, right? Because it's already 1:05, right? We'll take it after the lunch break. Don't worry, right? So, couple of more MCQs are there, right? And a descriptive question is there. We'll take it up after the lunch break. Done? Any doubts? Any doubts that you people have, right? Before I take the lunch break, sir. The FC powers. FC, I believe when you say FC, Finance Commission. Finance Commission powers, right? These are simply advisory. Finance Commission recommendations are advisory in nature. These are not binding on the government. Niti Aayog is a form under executive order, but it's government agency or trust or Government Act of 2013. Executive authority. It is an executive authority. That is, it's simply an authority. There is no company law. It is applicable under that. Absolutely no. Why we proceed with ICOR, not COR? I've told you this. Whenever you talk about capital output ratio, you're considering historical investment, total amount of investment. But if you want to find out what is the effectiveness of investment done in the last 1 year, last 2 years, you will not be able to find it using the capital output ratio. That is a precise reason. What we do is, we will calculate in the last 1 year, production has increased by how much, investment has increased by how much, incremental output, incremental capital, right? That will give you, as a result of this additional, right? As a result of this additional, right? Let's say input of rupee, or let's say additional investment of 1 rupee, how much has been the increase in the production. That is much more efficient. In the PC, powers were advisory. Again, please understand, do you think PC used to give recommendation to the government? The role of the PC was make 5-year plans. Okay. Done? Let's take a break then. We'll restart at 2:05. We'll restart again at 2:05 p.m. Okay, take a lunch break. Take a lunch break.